One, two, hey, 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 hey. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, hey, hey, 1, 2. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, 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 1, 2. Hey, 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 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Hey, hey, 1, 2.
Welcome back, everyone, from lunch. I hope you are feeling nourished. We are also collecting underloved bananas at the back because we don't believe in food waste. So if you wish to donate your banana back, it can go to the Banana Refuge. I know, it's a safe space. We are lucky now to have Deborah Williams in conversation with Caroline Bowditch, and I'm going to take a moment to introduce both of those esteemed performers, advocates and champions. But before I do, some small housekeeping matters. May I ask those of you who have mobile telephones on that are still making noise, if it's possible to put those to silent, that would be great. Secondly, I'd like to highlight that there is a QR code at the back of the room, which if you scan it, will provide you access to the live captioning on your telephone. We know that only one screen here in the centre of the room is showing the captioning, and there may be other places you would prefer to sit, but also still need to see that captioning. I would also say that on the third floor where the library is a kind of quieter space where if you wanted to watch the live feed on the Diversity Arts Facebook page, that also has the captioning underneath it and is just a different way to experience it if you would prefer not to be in this room at this time. So just a few housekeeping matters, and also thank you to some of the feedback we've received in the earlier sessions. We hope we have made a couple of small tweaks that might assist. What we have now is a wonderful opportunity to learn from Deborah Williams, the Executive Director of the Creative Diversity Network in the UK, looking at the questions around diversifying screen and stage. Deborah is the ED of Creative Diversity Network, which promotes diversity and inclusion in broadcasting. She's developed and delivered the organisation's Diamond Diversity Monitoring Scheme, which is used by many major broadcasters in the UK. Prior to this work, she undertook groundbreaking work as the diversity manager at the British Film Institute, which included opening a lottery fund to promote diversity and designing the standards for film. In addition to this passionate advocacy, Deborah has decades of experience in the performing and screen arts in the UK, including acting, teaching, and running her own theatre company. She's also lurking behind me, trying to make this as intimidating as possible. Inclusive in a scary way. Definitely. Joining her after the keynote will be Caroline Bowditch, who is currently Executive Director at Arts Access Victoria, who has been in the UK for the last 16 years as a performer, maker, teacher, speaker, and agent of change. Caroline has held the role of dance agent for change for over 4 years at the Scottish Dance Theatre and was visiting professor at Coventry University. Her 2014 work, Falling in Love with Frida, not only sounds spectacular from the reading and Googling that I have done, but was awarded a prestigious Herald Angel Award. A regular consultant on accessibility and inclusivity to Skånes Danstheater, Sweden and British Council, she is often invited to mentor artists at all levels for their artistic development. Please welcome Deborah to the stage.
Yes, hello. 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 Don't make me, come on now. Come on. I've flown for like 20 whatever hours to get here. And all you've had is lunch. Wake up, come on, hello. There you go. Hello. There you go. I've taken my name badge off. I want to take my top off, but I can't because I haven't got anything underneath except my bra and it's being streamed, but it's really hot. So I've forgotten what it's like to be under lights, darling. What can I say? Oh yeah, there's going to be some pictures rolling around in the background. Don't worry about them. Pay no attention to them whatsoever. Okay, I think I have some notes. Oh, here we go. Yes, I think I've got some notes. I'm going to try as much as possible to stick to the notes that I sent through last night for the interpreters and for the captioning. And yes, there we go. That's it. I hadn't labelled the pages, ironically. So, where do I start? I start, I guess, with... This is a stream of consciousness, by the way, so some of it will make absolute sense, some of it will make no sense, and it will come from all over the place. And I don't know for how long I'm going to talk, so when you get bored, stick your hand up. And don't anyone stick your hand up now. I know what you're like, you people. Where do I start? So I start at the beginning. My part one, I guess, is how do you solve a problem? Well, first of all, you identify it. So I was identified as the problem a long, long time ago in the arts industry, in the arts sector where I started. So having spent years in disability arts, making theatre, making work, touring nationally, internationally, doing consultation work, when it came to me doing what I wanted to do, all of a sudden I didn't meet Arts Council England's definition of diversity. I know. But ironically, they didn't tell me what the definition was, and they didn't tell me why I didn't meet it. So I threw a bit of a strop and went off on my way to try and figure out what the problem was. Why did I not meet Arts Council England's definition of diversity? What was wrong with me? I went off, I started a production company, I went on writing courses, so I went to BBC writing course, I went to Paint Plough writing course, I went to Tallowa Theatre Company writing. Everyone loved my writing. Oh my God, it was great. Oh my God, these stories I never heard anywhere. Oh Lord. Let's put them on. Oh, let's do a show. So all of that happened, but ironically, I was very good. And I wasn't even as good as I thought I was better. Which I know sounds really arrogant, but I was, and I am. And actually, that was the difference. The difference was I was setting my own barometer and measuring. I stopped paying attention to what other people thought was good and thought was relevant and thought was best. So, obviously it didn't help me much because I wasn't employed for over 10 years. But anyway, I kept going. And after about 10 years ago, the crash happened, the financial crash happened, and a few other things happened, and I had to find like a day job. So I thought, okay, I've done all this work, I've sort of figured out what the problem is. The problem isn't necessarily me, the problem is me in that space. So let's go back to the source. Let me go back now and get a job at the Arts Council and have a conversation with them and see how they work, see what their mechanisms are, how they do things, what it is about them that made them think that I was a problem and I didn't meet their definition. So I did. I went back in and I went into the illustrious team, all the theatre companies, all the theatres that you know from the UK, the National, the Dunmar, all those theatres. I was in the London theatre team working on theatre as a relationship manager, which means nothing, basically. It just means you tell people what they can and can't do, based on criteria, funding criteria. But you basically give them money even if they don't meet the criteria. That's basically how it worked and continues to work. Doesn't matter. It's like, oh, it's too hard. Oh, okay. Oh, carry on. That's the basic premise. So there wasn't any real sort of, if you don't meet this, you get into trouble. You get your leg slapped. None of that really happened. So I was in that group, and it became clear to me within that actually they didn't know what diversity was. They didn't really have a definition. It was just, okay, it was this. They had a black theatre festival, right? So black people, only black artists, not BAME, black artists, were allowed to make theatre, were allowed to make little pieces of theatre and show them off to people who may or may not buy it. Then they got into a bit of trouble in terms of legally. So they said, well, let's include disabled people in that. So they included disabled people. So when I was fine when I was black and making work. But when they opened it up to disabled people, they opened it up to only white disabled people. So I wasn't disabled. So I couldn't be disabled and I couldn't be black at the same time. So they put the white disabled people in the Black Theatre Festival, which meant that I didn't meet the criteria anymore. That's basically what happened. So, yeah, and it's true. And this was by black and disabled people. So, yeah. That hurt a little bit. But once I found out that that's what they did, I went, okay, it's time for me to leave the theatre team. And ironically, I got an opportunity to move sideways inside the organisation, which was my first real foray into diversity, cultural policy, writing, thinking about how you meet legislative agendas and how you make things work and how you make people do things and hold them to account when they say they're going to do them. So I did that, which was quite successful. I think some of you had met Abid when he came over here recently. So Abid and I were working together. We were sort of like yin and yang. I would shout at people and he'd offer them the tissues. And we did that for a bit. And then I left and he got promoted. Abid, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that, but it's true. You know, that's what happened. Obviously, not because Abid didn't do any work. Abid did all the work. I didn't do any of the work, and he got promoted for it. I keep saying that, and I know he's going to call me any second. Or at least message me on Facebook and go, Debs, stop it. But at least I know he's watching. Anyway, so the work that Abid was talking about is the work that I was the other half of that yin and yang with him. So we did a lot of that work, and it was, the creative case for diversity. It was about placing it in art. It was less about it being these internships and these programs and these small, low-scale things that you offer people which have nothing attached to them where they fall off the edge of a cliff at the end of it. This was about art. This was about the work. This was about how you build partnerships, how you work together. At least I thought it was. Anyway, I got bored of that, or basically I got sort of something big and shiny appeared, and I went, I want that. And that was the BFI. So the British Film Institute came along, and I couldn't say no, really. It was short-lived for many different reasons. For one, I was on a contract, and two, I got ill before the end of it. But I designed the standards. So I went in, they had this thing called ticks. They had this thing called 3 ticks, and it was okay, but what you do is that you tick a box for every percentage of a underrepresented group that you had on a film shoot, on screen or off screen, but you didn't start at the beginning. It was sort of halfway through the process of making your application, or you were in production or something. And it was just, basically it was tokenism, and people were using it like tokenism, and it was being seen as tokenism. So I said, well, why don't we set some standards? Why don't we, as the British Film Institute, set the standard, which is where the BFI diversity standards came from. So I went about thinking as an options paper. There were 4 options, 4 areas you cover, and there are 3 metrics within each option. You pick 2 of the options, and you pick 6 of the metrics. Off you go. And that was before you even applied for funding. So you had to do all of that before you applied for any public money. And what that did, it rippled around the world, which I didn't realise was going to happen. I really genuinely didn't, because if I did, I'd have charged more money. But anyway, I didn't realise it was going to have such a massive effect. But at the same time, what it did do was change culture. It changed the way people thought about diversity when they were making film, and what that meant to them in terms of filmmaking. After that, I got ill, basically. Basically, I was very ill, and I couldn't quite finish out the contract, and then I didn't get the full-time job, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, about 4 months after that, this job I'm now doing came up. And in many ways, it was the job I was looking for, the job I had been looking for, because by this time, I'd realised I didn't want to work on small local things. I wasn't interested in feathering my own nest. I didn't care what people thought about me, and there was a distinct lack of leadership around the diversity agenda. So I decided I wanted autonomy, I wanted long-term commitment from whoever I was going to work with, I wanted the will for change, I wanted to know that people wanted change to happen. And that's why I've ended up in the job I'm doing now. So to sum up, the job I'm doing now, it is all of the UK broadcasters, as well as BAFTA, and as well as the Welsh language broadcaster S4C, all of them, and alongside Turner Broadcasting and some development organisations, are the founding members of the organisation. We are a not-for-profit third sector organisation. We are a membership organisation, so they pay a membership fee, and one of the reasons they started this organisation, independent to all of them, was Diamond, and was that Project Diamond, was the idea that we needed to know who was making television in the UK, we need to know who was on television in the UK, and we need to know if people who were watching television felt represented. Well, we sort of did. We knew the answers to all those, but we needed evidence, and we needed data to do that. So it's 2 years old. This is coming into its 3rd year. We published the 2nd report at the end of last year, and the baseline demographic we use are the national survey, which is ONS data. We're roundabouts in terms of 6 protected characteristic groups. So in terms of gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender reassignment, disability, age, and there's one more, but I can't remember it. There's always one I can't remember.
Religion?
No, we don't do religion and faith belief. It'll come to me eventually. At some point, I'll just shout it out. But basically, that's what we do. We monitor those and we look at them. When I started, it was a very small organisation. It was short-term thinking because it was just to get Diamond started. And in some ways, it was under-resourced. And it was, I guess it was very safe and comfortable for people. And everyone was in competition with each other. Now, after 2 years of being there, it's not that anymore, as you can imagine. I sort of came in and went, I'm going in that direction, you can follow me or not. On the whole, they followed me, which is where I believe it's good to be a dictator. But I have goodwill. I have access to the highest executives in all of the broadcasters, in all of the organisations. we're beginning to see progress. We're beginning to see more and more people engage with Diamond and figure out what it is they want to do. At the moment, 30,000 individuals have given us their data, personal sensitive data. So we have information on that percentage on that amount of people working in the industry. We have a conference coming up in 3 weeks' time called the Diamond Exchange, which is looking at how you use data and evidence to build and drive your diversity agenda. We work with PACT, the production community in the UK. John McVeigh, in fact, the chief executive of PACT, was chair for 4 years of CDN. So my first 2 years, he was the chair, and he set the tone, and the production community have come along. It's taking time. It always does, but that's okay. We are setting the standard. I've said that we are the thought leaders. So we are now changing the way people think about diversity, engage with diversity, and what it is. And I use the word diversity deliberately. You'll see why shortly. I use it deliberately. We are working with everybody. This model won't fit everything and doesn't fit everything, but what I'm interested in is industrial change. I understand at a local level how and why things need to happen and spent 25 years doing that, but industrial change is where people think about collectively the cultures they set, the tones they set within the organisations within which they work and they develop and they contribute. In terms of on-screen and in the arts and in film and in television, you have to think about everything. And it's interesting, I was watching the stream this morning and someone asked a question about, and even when I came in the session before lunch, people were asking about, oh, I come from this group, and then for some reason that means that's all I can talk about. Well, it is if people around you have small minds, because we are fully rounded individuals and we are all diverse. So I would never want to tell a story, don't get me wrong, I did when I started, tell a story about disability and about ethnicity and about gender. But I told 3 of those, and each different play had a different perspective leading the narrative. So it was always about how are these interchanging, interlocking, impacting on each other within one individual, never mind the communities within which that individual sits. It doesn't work if all you are doing is being pigeonholed based on the group within which you sit as underrepresented, because all you're doing is continuing to underrepresent. People are beginning to understand that now. You know, my next conversation is around commissioning with the broadcasters and is looking at content, and content is king, and there isn't enough content for the hours that we have, so we've got to do something about it. So that means you change your base. And I'll give you an example as to how and why I believe this is right. The first example is the Academy Awards. So the Academy Awards that happened on Sunday, obviously I'm not going to take credit for everyone from a minority group that won an award, because that would be, stretching it a bit. But when I was at the BFI, I got an email from the Academy asking me how to diversify. It was around when Oscars So White started, and they didn't know what to do. They asked me, I had a cup of coffee, and I talked to them about what their organisation model was. It's a membership organisation, which a lot of people don't understand. They think it isn't. It's a membership organisation, and each year they invite people to become members. I said, well, why don't you just invite more different people to become members? And they did. And you have what you had on Sunday night. So you have people, you have a black woman winning an award in her craft. Now, that doesn't mean that's the first film that she ever made. Black Panther was the first film she ever made, but it was the first film that the members of the Academy, within her craft, were able to see the quality of the work that she did. That's the difference. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And that is always what it's about. It is always about... So that was the first one. There is another one, but I can't remember what the second one was. But anyway, I do that a lot. I just drop these pearls of wisdom all over the place and things happen. It's quite magical, really. Even I'm surprised myself at that one. But I still haven't had an invite to the Oscars, by the way. Just saying. But anyway, it was a cup of coffee and 3 emails, and that's all it took, was for someone to say to them, well, do this, or try this. And they did. And that's sometimes how it works at a local level. But that has had a global impact, because everybody's talking about it now. And I will take the credit that Spike Lee would never have won his Oscar if I hadn't done that. Just saying. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap up. So I've been asked to ask a couple of major things that have come to me that I'm gonna because Caroline wants to talk to me apparently. My learning is ongoing. I always learn. I never stop. Sometimes I think I know what I'm doing, and then other times, no, I've got no idea. The organisation I run is a collaborative space now. It's stable financially. Staff team is growing. We have academic partners, international inquiries from all over the place. Thought leadership and working together with each other and not pulling against each other, which is really important in that space. I know you have SDIN here, and I think the reason why it will work eventually is major players working together, and you need to commit, and it is a long-term commitment. It's not overnight, it won't be easy, and most of the time you'll be doing it on your own, and no one will follow you, so don't believe anyone will. But if you want to be the best in the world at this, then absolutely stick to it. In terms of government, for us it's easy. Most of our governments operate as our critical friends, so they create legislation, then they have no idea what to do with legislation, and then people like me come along and say, this is what you do with legislation. So that's basically how governments work. And I have some great relationships with my cultural, well, I did until now, with the cultural team within the UK, and I've worked very, very closely with them for over 5 years. And that's minister, obviously you all know about the revolving door of ministers, even more than in this country, and culture is the safe space, so they come and go within seconds in culture. But, we've managed to steady the boat a little bit there and extend beyond. So to see the importance of culture beyond culture sitting in culture, so the impact it has on workforce, on health, on education, on environment, on international development, all of those things, on export and trade. I think inclusive capacity building is incredibly difficult and is incredibly challenging. The things I would say is don't say yes to the first person that comes up to you and says, I can change, I can make all this go away overnight, because they'll be lying. They can't, and they just want your money, and they want your time, and they will steal from you, and they will not give you anything back. So don't do that. That's really simple. Mostly, and I think the previous panel before lunch, I would say you have most of the expertise and the knowledge and the experience sitting within your organisations. Why don't you start there? Why don't you start with those people? Look at how you create policies for recruitment, for promotion, for retaining staff, for working with people, for co-production, for building partnerships, for developing new projects. All of these things, you have an expertise within your organisation. There is no reason why you should not and could not start there and must not start there. I think that's everything now. I think that's everything on my little list. The clips were just of shows that I'd done over the past few years, and I'm going to wander over there now and talk to Caroline, and they're going to change it because there is a definition. I was asked about the term diversity, and I'm going to put up now why I believe the term diversity is really, really important. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. Cheers.
Thanks, Debs.
Oh, God. How do I get in?
Spin it.
There we go.
Yay. Brilliant. Thank you
there we
for
go.
that. So wise as per usual. I've had the pleasure of knowing Deb for a very long time. And I don't know if you remember this, but I had a one-to-one with Deb when I first moved to the UK, when I was doing some cultural awareness training. Do you remember this? Yeah, right? So I was very green in the UK, hadn't really experienced, I didn't think, much cultural diversity in my life. And the first thing you said to me is, I need to just say to you up front, you are going to get it wrong. And that's okay. And those words stay with me, and I pass them on to other people on a regular basis because I think it absolutely happens in the diversity space all the time. And I think the really important thing, as we saw earlier today, is that we acknowledge when it goes wrong, when we are aware of it. So, yes, know that sits with me still.
I say that to everyone, though, so,
I don't feel special. It's fine.
But you were probably one of the first.
I really want to bring you in, but I would love, you said some really very strategically important things that need to be said in this country. Having been back for 6 months, I've seen the vast difference between the UK and here, and I would love you to talk a bit more around the things that you mentioned around leadership, and I think the thing that happens in the UK is that diversity is very much seen as a priority.
Yeah. I guess I've fallen into the trap of being a leader, whatever that means, because I don't purport to be one, but people perceive me as one, and I find that challenging. But what it means to me is that thing that you really don't always want to do, which is the first. It means saying the things that people don't want to hear. It means challenging. It means doing the things that nobody wants to do, or if they do want to do it, they are tentative and scared and afraid, and it's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. But it's also, within the space I am now working in, it is working with executives who are leaders in everything they do, except for diversity. And understanding that you don't browbeat people, you don't beat them up. What you do is you work with them and you facilitate their learning and their discovery. And that's why I like doing the work at industrial level, because I see industries, I see minds change, pennies drop really quickly, and minds change. And it's quite fascinating. And when people at that level want to talk to you, want to talk to me about diversity, you know that there's something in it. Whether that's money, whether that's kudos, whatever it is. But for most people, it is genuinely, yeah, I've got it. When the penny drops, they go, I've got it, and they understand it.
And they embed it.
Most of them. The embedding takes time, because embedding is change. And what you don't want to do is go into a space and pull the rug out from underneath people and say, there, you've got to do it now. So there are strategic ways of doing that and different ways of doing that, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But as much as possible, I work with what I've got. So I work with, if I go into an organisation and they have staff networks, which I just think of, what? Meetings once a month for all the brown people or all the disabled people or all the RGB people, whatever. I go, okay, but I work with what I've got, because clearly those people have been empowered within their work environment to have a voice. So why not work with them to develop and grow things? And then see how they connect with each other, and then see what problems that brings, because, we like to think diversity is inclusive, but it really isn't. Because everyone, even with, within disability, as you no doubt know, across in, the UK, when, one impairment group needs access, and then their access clashes with another impairment group, and it all kicks off, it's incredibly difficult. But you're always trying to build on what you have and where the open door is, and that makes a difference, because it not comforts people, but I think it helps people understand that the change includes them, doesn't exclude them.
I think that concept of go where the open door is a really important one, because I imagine that lots of us in this room working in this kind of space spend a lot of time knocking on doors that are very closed to us, which becomes exhausting and disheartening.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot, my colleague Veronica Pardo and I talk a lot about being really strategic allies and the importance of having allies. And I think going where the open door is also another great thing to have in the back pocket. I'm aware that this definition's come up. I don't know if you want to...
So this is the definition, and this is the definition I found online when I was writing the business plan for CDN. And the picture of William Merritt Chase at the beginning is it's an old white man who was an artist in the 1800s. And this is his definition of diversity. Diversity is not casual, liberal tolerance of anything not yourself. It is not polite accommodation. Instead, diversity is, in action, the sometimes painful awareness that other people, other races, other voices, other habits of mind have to have as much integrity as of being, as much claim on the world as you do. And I urge you, amid all the differences present to the eye and mind, to reach out to create the bond that will protect us all. We are all meant to be here together. That's my definition of diversity. And
That's glorious.
And that's why I think the term is critical. So when people come to me and say, oh, I don't do diversity, I do inclusion, or we're not going to do D&I, we're going to do I&D, I'm like, I don't really care. That is what I do, and that is what I expect anyone who comes near me to do as well. And if you don't do that, I want to know why. Anyway, that's it.
I would like to welcome questions from the floor if you're happy for that to happen.
Absolutely.
At this point. We have some roving microphone people. Questions for Deb?
Oh, wow, no questions. Excellent.
They're all just astounded by your wisdom, slightly intimidated. Yeah, brave ones. Great.
Or possibly it's the fact that I said I like being a dictator. I don't really.
You do?
Well, I do.
Yeah, you do.
But
Let's not... We all love a bit of that.
So hello, I'm Josh. I'm an independent producer. Also spent some time in the UK and have come back to Australia again, realising the vast difference between here and there. My question is about how do we hold, I guess, arts organisations and institutions accountable, which I guess is a big question. Yeah. But I can go on, but that is the question.
I think it depends on which side of the fence you're sitting on. On the producer side of the fence, I would say don't give them your work, don't give them your time, don't give them your energy, and if they want anything from you, charge them for it. Because the minute you ask somebody for money, you'll know, and whether they say yes or no, you'll have a better understanding as to where their commitment lies and where their generosity lies. I would always say that. On the funding side, I would say, things like the creative case or something similar, where you have a criteria, a policy. Policies are your friend in the cultural spaces. Policies really are your friends because you can say, this is what we believe in, and this is what we work to. There can be policy, values, principles, whatever you want to call them, but those things are also quite important. For the big organisations, what I ended up doing in the UK was going, I can't be bothered. I actually can't be bothered with you, dismiss them. And it's really interesting, at least 2 of them have now come to my door and they want me to help them because they've gone, oh, you're miles ahead of us and we don't know what we're doing. I'm like, yeah, you're damn right I am. It takes time though. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Another question towards the back. Microphone is on its way to you.
Hi, it's Sarah again. You talked about diamond diversity and there were 4 options and I can't remember. What are they?
Okay, so no, that was the diversity standards, the BFI. Okay. The four options are on-screen, off-screen, distribution and audiences, and then development. So things like apprenticeships, internships, masterclasses, things like that. So you can pick from any of those 4. You pick 2 of them, at least 2, and within that you pick 3 metrics. So within there are metrics around your top-line talent off-screen, top-line talent on-screen, what sort of distribution channels you're using, which audiences you're targeting at in terms of, and all of this is everything. So this is from a short to documentaries to full features. Everything has to go through that process.
Nice.
Hi, I'm Andy Butler. Thank you so much, Deborah. That was really amazing. I guess I had one question about a comment that you made towards the end about the previous panel, and you made the observation that I think is very true, that we have a lot of the expertise that we need here in this room and in many organisations. But I guess one thing that I've observed amongst my peers, myself having been a diverse person who's worked for arts organisations, is that so many of us are really burning out from the sort of work that we're doing. And I was just wondering whether you could comment on what organisations could do to really nurture and foster and support the expertise that we already have here.
Well, so that's a two-sided, for me, that's a two-sided response. One is basic well-being and looking after your staff, no matter who they are. And if organisations don't do that, and which, a lot of cultural organisations don't because they can't, they don't have the resource, they don't have the capacity. But, flexible working from home, short days, short weeks, spreading hours out over longer periods of time, things like that, just with all your staff, help. I think specifically around diverse staff is, and people, especially if you're sitting from an underrepresented group and you're seeking to represent that group or represent this massive agenda, first of all, don't call it an issue or a problem. That's the first step, because the individual will take that and you will start to think of yourself as an issue or a problem that needs to be solved. So that's the first thing. It is an agenda. It is an agenda item that you should be looking at for your business. And secondly, within that, so integrate that individual doing that work across your business. And then you're making use of all of their strengths, and you're identifying what they can do well and where they may need support. I think don't sit it outside as a silo it as something other that needs to be done just because it has to be done. But really it is about the individual being a part of your totality of your staff team, your totality of your organisation, and getting a better understanding of how that works, really. Does that answer your question? You can talk afterwards. I'm here all week, literally.
Hello.
Hey.
My name is Eyal, and I work for a number of organizations. I guess putting the arts back on the table whenever the other stakeholders push it off. And first of all, thank you for bringing wit into what otherwise would be a really exhausting day. And I think my question, we've been talking a lot about policy setting, governance, decision-making, programming that look at diversity from a very organizational point of view. But in my experience, I feel like we're all being bombarded constantly by human personal prejudice. Like people's attitude are so full of preconceived ideas about everybody else. From the moment that people ask you where you're from in a conversation, there's already a whole lot of structures coming around of what they think you should be and what you think you should be doing. And I'm wondering if you could comment on that, to me, crucial intersection of the personal lives of people that may not even think about respect and diversity, and what actually happens in the boardroom or at the programming table.
I could say a lot about that. My journey has been an incredibly long one and strange one. So I was an actor, right? I acted in school at the age of 7. School. So I started in school at 7 because I was being bullied. So it was like, build your confidence. So I started acting. And then I started acting at church. And then I left school without any qualifications at all. I have no degrees or any sort of education. And all I wanted to do was act. And all I got was no. So I discovered a way of just going around all of these. There was no path. There was no direct path for me. So I figured out a way that was like, I'd go to the left and then further to the left and then, I guess swing to the right. And that's how I navigated my way through to where I am today, wherever that is, in terms of what it means. And within that, I had multiple identities as an individual. So sometimes I would be Debs and I did stuff and everyone hated that. If ever I said, I'm Debs and I did stuff, people would want to know more and I don't know. I'll do what I feel like doing. But I was an arsey sort of person, and that kind of helped. I was raised by my mother and I was raised well to be an individual and to be myself. And I guess it's the term that I hate, the American term that I hate, which is stand your ground. Whenever someone takes arts off the table, you put it back on. You know, the clips of the shows that I did, I created shows that nobody would imagine. Nobody would imagine that, that an overweight black woman would, make a show where her picture, where she's naked with post-its on her. Nobody would go, oh, good Lord. Everyone went, good Lord, about that show, and I did it first. The second show was, I was a TV evangelist, but was actually a dominatrix. So I did the whole show with a Bible, a whip, and a dildo. And no one, as you do, yeah. And people were like, what? Huh? The third show was about mental health and black women, and at the time, back in 1997, 98, nobody was talking about mental health. You know, black women were always strong, and we could do everything, and we could take everything. No. So a conversation about black women, mental health and mental illness, all of those things were things that people weren't doing. So stand your ground, find your identity, navigate it as you need to, but also use your art. You know, use your art as the way to respond to people who sometimes have no idea, because their minds are so narrow, they see nothing else. But, and then again, I will always come back to it. If they're not interested, they're not interested. Walk away. Because trying to please people who will never, ever be pleased or be happy, that's not your job. That's not your job. Your job is to entertain people and engage with people who want to do this. That's what your job is as an artist.
Brilliant. That's a very glorious place for us to
do we need to stop?
finish
Sorry.
our conversation.
I talked too much at the beginning, sorry.
Deb's here all week. No, I'm joking.
I am, literally.
She is here all week. It's true. Thank you. It's been a complete pleasure. Please join me
ditto.
in thanking Deb. Thanks, darling.
Thank you. We're going to do some more transitions into space, in that we need to reset the stage for our next panel, which has a cast of seven, which is a lot of chairs for a little stage. But while we do that, Caroline Bowditch has graciously agreed to help collaborate on a little session that we're going to do together. But I would like to join with the... Yeah, well, you can stay for it, though, if you want. Well, you know.
Sit the corner.
But please, if you would, give them another round of applause. I believe that both it is the intent and the effect of a session like Deb's is to provoke. There is plenty in her conversation that is sitting with me, whether it's trying to understand, I guess, the tactical and political of what you're describing, and whether or not that would be something that I or my organisation might take on or apply. There are some open doors, but some shut ones too. And I certainly think that the questions from the floor really highlight that even as we're trying to work together and continue learning, I wouldn't exactly say that that journey is a smooth one and that our learning is complete. So, you know, a long way to go, but inspiring words to keep you on the journey. May I have a second microphone, if that's all right? Just from wherever they appear. Thank you. That's for Caroline. I do like to sometimes, but not today. And a little quiet hello to I think there was like 30, 40 people on the live stream following along. I popped backstage for a little while and could see that there was comments and conversation, and certainly the social media discussion has been really vibrant and lively. Not all of it in concord, but I like to see some healthy disagreement. We have now... I think it's just about 10 minutes. I just looked at my watch and it goes, you have 159 steps left to take in this hour. I was like, thank you, that's very unhelpful watch. We have 10 minutes, much better. Caroline, May I hand over the microphone to you?
Sure you can. We wanted to just take a moment to have a little breath. There's been a lot coming at you. There's been a lot to process. There's a lot to kind of ponder, to reflect on. And we just wanted to lead you through a little way of potentially allowing some of that to land and also some of it to lift. So what I would invite you to do is to just take a deep breath in with me. And as you breathe out, just let your body drop into whatever surface it's making contact with. So allow yourself to potentially feel your feet on the floor, on foot plates. Allow the backs of your legs to rest on the chair. Just notice for yourself how far up your back, the backrest comes of your chair. And just see if you can get a sense of where your arms are hanging today, right now. See if you can get a sense of where your clothes end on your body. Can you feel the tops of socks if you've got them on, or straps of sandals? Can you feel the ends of your sleeves? Can you get a sense of temperature in the room? How is that for you? Just notice for yourself. Make sure you remember to keep breathing. And every time you breathe out, try and let your body just drop a bit more into whatever surface it's making contact with. And as you sit in this restful place, just notice for yourself what is resonating in your body. What words are floating around your head? What has provoked your embers in your belly being stirred this morning? What are the gems that you want to take with you? That you want to stash and have in your back pocket for those moments when you potentially feel like you need more support, more strength, some bolstering. And then what are you happy to have just let go? Just imagining that you've let words wash over you because that's what's been coming at you. And let anything that doesn't feel useful at the moment just drop off you. And just take a moment to maybe allow your head to move in a direction that feels comfortable for it. So it might be about just turning it from side to side. It might be dropping one ear to your shoulder and the other way. It might be rolling your chin across your chest. And taking that same attention to your shoulders and your upper limbs. So just maybe finding some circles through your shoulders. Maybe some wiggles through your fingers. And take your attention to your spine. So seeing if you can get a sense of the length of your spine from the base of your skull right down to your tailbone. And maybe there's some curves to be found in your spine. Maybe a little twist. Only do what feels good for your body. This is not about how it looks. This is not an exercise program. This is literally just a connecting with your body right now. Take that same attention to your sit bones and your lower limbs. So noticing how your lower limbs are resting. How are your feet feeling in your shoes? Are you wishing you'd worn different ones or that you didn't have them on? Just notice that for yourself. Maybe find some circles through your ankles or a few little wobbles through your legs. Whatever feels good for you. Take a deep breath in. And have, as you breathe out, just let your arms, or find a way to stretch up, a bit like you're going to yawn. So have a massive yawn. Nice, and have a little wiggle with that. How are we feeling? Yeah? Ready for the next bit? If you want to, just to have a little bit of a waking up moment, just give your face a massage, a little massage. So think about just squeezing across your cheeks, around your jaw. Maybe find some wiggling through your jaw. You can tell I'm a performer. I don't really care how I look or sound at all times. Slightly worrying for the industry, but there we go. Great. Maybe think about some raindrop fingers on your scalp. Maybe down your face. And then just to finish off, give yourself a brush like you're brushing cobwebs off your torso and upper body. So you might want to brush them off your face. Down your arms. Down your torso, down your lower limbs. One last deep breath in. And out. Let it out with a sigh. Great. Pleasure.
I had my eyes closed, so then I sort of had to look around and think, oh God, are the chairs there? I hope it was seamless for all involved. I would like to now welcome to the stage, because we are going straight into our next session, I would like to welcome Veronica Pardo, Sophie Black, Leah Jing McIntosh, Kath Duncan, and Bali Pada, who will all be introduced more fully. They need to come back out. They're in there eating the green room bickies. Yeah, right. Veronica, I think I saw Veronica in the front earlier, so they may have moved. No, it's all right. Our next panel, who will be slowly and impressively materialising from the back of the room, are going to be looking at the state of play of equity and inclusion here in Australia. My apologies, Michael Williams is replacing Sophie Black. And they'll be bringing the conversation, I guess, back home, looking at what the status quo is here in Australia for equity and inclusion, and also how we might like to shift that status quo. I think some of the discussions on the need for change can often be met with defensiveness or discomfort, all issues that I think a number of our speakers have raised, but also empty platitudes. And I think that while many of them are very pretty, they're often not terribly effectual. Oh, I hear the noisy burbling. You're right. Today our panel will be looking at what it is we might need from allies, champions, critical friends, even from those we might traditionally consider our enemies. And they'll give us some insight in their respective practice areas, which are as diverse as multicultural arts, as publishing, as performance and dance, as well as in screen and film. So as they emerge from the stage, if you would put your hands together for our esteemed panel. Of course, please do. Thank you very much. Veronica, I have not fully introduced you, but I will introduce you and then I'll leave you to introduce the rest of our panel. Does that work? Head on up.
What's it? This is scary. I know I'm going to knock that over.
Veronica here, right at this edge of the stage with me, is the CEO of Multicultural Arts Victoria and was previously the Executive Director of Arts Access Victoria. Clearly, in those two biographical details alone, you know that this is a person with a deep passion for social justice and equity, and that many others of you here will already have experienced and interacted with many of the campaigns that she has spearheaded relating to the inclusion of all people in the arts and culture, whether they be as audience, makers or cultural innovators. Please welcome Veronica and thank her for leading this panel.
Thank you all. Oh, it's a difficult position to follow that last act. Amazing, the two of them. But we're going to give it our best shot. We know it's 2 o'clock, and so the task that's been set for the panel is to really fire us up. Let me begin today by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also my respects to the elders of any other communities who may be with us today. I'm going to introduce you very briefly to our panellists. I'm going to suggest that if you want a full bio about all these amazing people and their accomplishments, you go to the website. Let me start by introducing Michael, and I have to do a bit of a flick over because we were expecting to have Sophie Black with us today, and Michael has kindly accepted the challenge at the last minute to step in, as unfortunately Sophie is unwell. So you all know Michael Williams as the director of the Wheeler Centre for Books, Writing and Ideas. He has worked at the Wheeler Centre since 2009 and he's known for so many things. I'm not even going to list them. But go to the website and find out if you don't know. He's at our end. And then we've got, of course, Tony Briggs, who is a Yorta Wurundjeri actor, writer, director and producer for theatre and film, and the creator and writer of the feature film The Sapphires, which premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2012. Welcome. Our next panellist is Kath Duncan. She's a researcher, producer and co-founder of the unique spoken word cabaret troupe of deaf and disabled queer performers, Quippings. She's taught media production, has worked all over the place and loves a great argument. So
I do.
Let's see if we can give her one today. Thank you, Kath. Leah Jing McIntosh is the founding editor of Liminal magazine. Her writing has been published by the Saturday Paper, the Wheeler Centre, SBS, Swampland, Archer and Metro. Welcome, Leah. And last but not least, Bali Padda is an industry development executive at Screen Australia. He's joined Screen Australia's development unit in November 2018, managing the People and Sector Development Program. Welcome. Now, I've got a panel of 5, so I'm going to ask you to keep your comments to the point. I do know the pain of what I'm asking you because I'm the least brief person I know. So we'll see how we go, though, and to have some time at the end for some questions. So I'm going to start off by picking up on a theme that's been highlighted throughout the morning session and the earlier session this afternoon. sometimes when we're having these discussions about the need for change in relation to diverse representation in the arts, we can often be met with defensiveness and discomfort. But what would you honestly say about this issue if you didn't have to worry about people's feelings? Now,
It's a good one, isn't it?
I'm going to go to Kath first, because I'm hoping she's going to set the tone for our conversation. Take it away, Kath.
Well, just cutting straight to it, if we're talking about, how do we bring diversity into all arts orgs from, big to little and all the rest of it, I'm just going to go straight there and say it. If you accept public money, you should be tied to, and in fact lose your public money, this is everybody, if you don't dedicate, well, look, I'm just going to talk about disability at this point, right? So I'm happy for everyone who wants to have a go at this, but just for disability alone, 20% of all your productions, 20% of all your staff, 20% of all your audience, 20% of all your funding should go to programs, productions, shows, works, whatever, by deaf and disabled people, full stop, there we go.
Fabulous. Michael, you run an organisation in receipt of public funds. How do you respond to a challenge like that?
Excellent work, Veronica. That was super.
Yes, well done.
No, I'm going to make a parallel statement rather than responding to that one, which is a statement that you don't hear people say very often, but more people in positions like mine should be saying, which is we fail. We fail at it all the time. Not because we don't think it's important, but because we're deeply compromised, because we're part of a system that is deeply entrenched and has all kinds of structural ways that people are excluded, all kinds of structural ways that privilege functions. And we fail knowing we're failing. We fail trying to fail less and trying to do better. But I don't know a cultural institution that I think can hold its head up completely at their track record on anything to do with equity, to do with inclusivity, to do with diversity. I think that we all fall short. And I think it's a massive problem. That didn't answer the question.
No,
I don't know if you spotted
it was a good
that.
answer. I'll take that answer. Tony, do you take that answer? Do you think that cultural organisations are failing us?
Well, I think our society is failing us. I think that whoever's running these cultural organisations, whoever's working in them, it all comes back to what it is that your core beliefs are and what you've grown up with. I think that you got to take these conversations to the youth. You have to take it to the future. And I'm a big believer in helping to educate the youth in order to create a better future. And I think what we're doing is we're beating our heads against a brick wall, because a lot of people need to survive. There are some people who are working for these organisations who they need the paycheck, and so a lot of decisions are based around that, and how they're going to put food on the table for their child, or how they are going to be able to provide enough funds to their niece or their nephew who has cerebral palsy, for example. We don't know that, We don't know what the individual's lives are involved here. So yeah, to a degree, I wholeheartedly support that. But there are a lot of parts to that puzzle, But I really do think that it's got to start with the education. It's got to start with the school system. I do, because. I grew up with a very, very close friend of mine, who's still a friend of mine today, who was born disabled, and he used to have to run around on his hands to be able to tackle me while I was running around on my knees while we were playing rugby, and he would give as good as he got from me, and we were always equal to this day. He does a lot of public speaking, and it occurred to me a couple of years ago that he'd been coming to Melbourne a bit, and we hadn't seen each other for years. So we got, we hooked up, and I brought my kids along, and they were like gobsmacked. And then the questions came a week after, 2 weeks after. How do you know him? I said, I grew up with him. What do you talk? You know, I've got a 7-year-old daughter, I've got a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old boy, you know. So it's the education, and now it's normal. I think that's where we start.
And do you reckon that people are receptive to these truths, or do we still have to
It's
couch
confronting,
them?
you know, it's confronting. The truth is confronting, no matter what the truth is, it's confronting, but we just have to be brave enough to, you know, deal with these things head on. The reality is, you know, we're all here in this together and we're not going anywhere.
Bali, you're actually working for the government at the moment.
How dare you?
But
Yes,
we have so much hope for the government as a result.
Oh.
But
Pressure's
how
on.
do you find telling, talking truth to power? How do you find having these conversations behind those doors? Are you able to speak, I think, forthrightly about these issues, or is there still tremendous sensitivity to the lack of progress in diversity and inclusion?
I definitely say that there's a diplomatic dance that happens in all kind of rooms and closed doors and out there in the public forum. So I've been an independent artist for roughly 10 to 12 years, so this is my first full-time job after doing a short stint during my uni years. So it took a lot of cultural shift and change for me personally to step into a place with structure and corporate structure, and then governance, and then government structure as well. So it definitely requires, yes, a bit of push and pull. So I didn't go guns blazing straight away in the space. It was also worthwhile for me to listen and understand about what system am I sitting in. What is the, what's the lay of the land here? Who's on the field? What are their positions? What are they playing? And then to go, all right, I've always tried to make it an MO, a modus operandi of mine, to really understand the other point of view, to then provide, I guess, value into their perspective, which is very difficult. I do not expect anyone else to do that. It's really hard work because it exhausts me at the same time. And sometimes I do need to slap people around the head and go, just shut up and listen. Like, stop making the same mistakes over and over again. But as Deborah said before, is that, it's okay to fail. And it's okay for us in this room to fail because we're all trying to do the best we can within systems and structures that have marginalised us. But what's also important is that for the people, I guess, in the system and operating the system, that they're also allowed to fail. I think there's a lot of fear around trying to do something right, but then, whoops, there's that blind spot that we didn't know. We've suddenly realised that there's this whole other area that we've left uncovered. And so there's a fear of a repercussion because they tried to do something well over here, but then realised that they missed out this whole section over here. So there needs to be a bit of a delicate balance with that. As long as there's learning from failures, as long as everyone's learning from any of those failures that occurs, so that, again, you shine a light on each of those blind spots and you keep developing into those blind spots.
Yeah, as long as the cycle doesn't just keep repeating itself.
Yeah. I'm not entirely convinced by that. I actually think we are still taking, people's feelings far too seriously. I mean, because I think we've had failures for, 200 years now or something, in most cultural orgs. So we've had enough failure and, time to move on to the next thing. And I think also those most affected need to have the space to lead. Because I think, with all due respect to Tony here, not systemic enough. I mean, I think that individual contact is really important, but I think there's like a bigger layer of systemic change that actually I think needs to be forced, to have it happen. I know no one likes that word, but I mean, really, we've had nothing.
So, we've had enough. What about you, Leah? Have you had enough? What would you say if you were concerned about the feelings of the people that you work with, your bosses, your sector colleagues? What would you feel brave enough to say to them?
I told Veronica before the panel that both of my bosses are in this room, I think. And they're both white and they're both wonderful. what would I
Nice
say?
work. Very nice.
I don't know. I think that's a complicated question because as you're a white woman, you're asking me to put myself out there, and I don't know if I want to. And I think that as an act of self-preservation is actually really important, and deciding what kind of boundaries I will have as a person of colour in the industry is really important. I think that what Michael was saying about failure is entirely true. I think the resident orgs in this building are still working towards diversity. I can count the amount of people of colour who work in this building on maybe 2 hands, maybe.
Can I just correct you there? Veronica's actually a person of colour. She's got a Latina background.
Oh,
Just
I
thought I'd chuck that in
apologise.
for the hell of it. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I apologise.
I think
I
your
know
point
you
is very
wouldn't
well
have corrected
made.
her, would you?
I think it's a very good point. It's an excellent point. Nobody has to answer any questions, and the capacity to say I don't want to answer that question is something that I'll fight to the death for. So
Yeah.
please continue. But thank you, Kath.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem.
Let me gather my train of thought. Yes, I think failure is definitely linked to education and figuring out how to fail and fail better. To quote Beckett, the beautiful white man he is really integral to our way forward, and to not be afraid of failure. Just like I failed on stage.
No failure on stage today. Well, maybe a little bit.
I'll take that as a challenge.
Let's stay with you then, Leah, and because you've just picked up a thread for my next question. So if we accept the premise that to achieve equality in the arts, we need to shift those underlying power bases so that diverse and disabled people and Aboriginal people actually occupy positions of creative agency and decision making, how do we do that? What do we actually need from allies?
We are publishing a print edition in the next month, which is very exciting. And in one of the interviews, Texter Queen, her advice to emerging artists is to get a straight white man with a beard to be on your arm. And she says, if you're talking openly about wanting to burn white supremacy to the ground, having a good white person close by is evidence to other white people you're talking about structures and not the individual. So Texter Queen's phenomenal.
She is.
Isn't she? And I honestly think that the only way forward is to find white allies who understand that people of colour and disabled people and diverse peoples are excellent, and they have the ability to be just as good as white people and institutions.
Tony, what's your solution? What do you reckon allies need to do, and what do we need to do to make that change?
That's
It's a biggie.
that's a hard question. All I know is what I need to do, and what I need to do is it's alluding to what you were pointing out before, is that to take control. And I had to take control of my own career. I had to decide that the best way for me to move forward, to be able to tell the kind of stories that I want to tell, whether it be as an actor, writer or producer, is to be able to take control of what it is, take ownership of what I want to do with my life. I can't tell anybody else what they need to do, but I can invite them to come along and the journey with me, if they so choose to, whether they are a person of colour or not. And I can only hope that if they do come on that journey with me, that they are open-minded enough and willing to learn and to understand why I say these things I say, why I want to tell the stories I do. I can't force them to do anything they don't want to do. People are never going to do what you want them to do. They have to discover for themselves, and the door is wide open as far as I'm concerned from a creative point of view. to allow that to happen, for people to walk into that door and to come on the journey with me. And make no mistake about it, I will never take a backward step, because I've done that and I've been burnt many, many times. But I'm moving forward, and moving fast and hard as well. You know, I'm a proud Aboriginal man, and that pride comes from the strength of incredible Aboriginal women in my life. You know, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, you know, and so on. And so you know, I've been influenced strongly by what I have seen growing up as a young boy through the 70s, and the heady years of the 80s, I think too, you know, because, and politically, you know, I was kind of right there, it was right in front of me all the time. You know, the marches, I was in the thick of it, my family are right at the forefront of it all. You know, the political movement in the 80s with my uncle Sol Blair, with, you know, mixing, you know, all kinds of people, you know, at the top echelon. And I was in the room with these people, you know, so I get to hear and see things that I'm very privileged in that sense. So it was never just one black person or 5 black people or a room full of black people. It never has been, and I don't think it ever will be, and I don't think it ever should be, because nothing will change if it's going to be like that. But they were definitely leading, and those other people were definitely listening. Whether they made the right choices or not, history, you know, will tell you one thing, and it's yet to tell you in the future as well.
What do you reckon, Kat?
Exactly. I'm so glad you asked. So, I was really interested to see, I can see Jeremy Smith's here from the Australia Council. Do you remember how much I whinged when the Australia Council announced they were running these mentoring schemes for people with disabilities? Whinge. And then I sort of sat back and I thought, you know, I think there's something in this about making incentives for everybody, particularly sitting in those sort of bigger managerial positions, you know, across the board, to be able to go, you know what, hey, guess what we've got for you? You are not only doing your CEO or managery thingy, but you are also mentoring a cold, Indigenous, disabled, or all 3 of them or something-ish, personal people every year from now on until you leave. And that we have financial incentives to do a scale. I guess I'm right into, let's try, how do we make these great ideas, you know, pragmatic? So, and that there be incentives to do that. And so you're not necessarily saying to them, you're mentoring so this person takes over your job, but you sort of leave that hovering in the air. Anyway, that's my idea.
Oh, well, so people taking over people's jobs, I think that's a really interesting kind of proposition. And I think we have to go there, and we need to see more examples. And I'm going to go over to you, Michael, next.
Every time I'm ready for it. Actually, I've got to be honest, the emails I had this morning, anyone in this room who wants my job this afternoon, you can go, you can eat the rest of the biscuit that's on the desk, as long as you answer those emails. I'll be grateful. I think there is a really, I think there's a lot of value to it. I think there's something very serious at the heart of it. And I don't have any useful solutions to any of this, but the one thing that I try and absorb into my own practice is making sure that privilege never goes unrealised or unremarked upon. That structurally there are all kinds of ways that privilege functions, and I think our first responsibility is to call it out when we say it, and then to work out how that privilege can be used, how it can be handed on, how it can be a tool for the very change that it would naturally want to resist. I have all manner of personal privileges because of who I am and the circumstances around my birth, but an organisation like the Wheeler Centre has a whole lot of embedded privilege, a certain relationship to government, a certain authority, a certain kind of institutional status that protects us and lets it function in the world in a similar way to the way individual privilege works. And so my feeling is that the responsibility of anyone running an organisation is to think, how is this a jumping off point for the kind of change we want to see? How can we use whether it's the platform that is our stage, our megaphone, our whatever it is, how can we use it not just to perpetuate the privilege that put us here, but to find ways to challenge it? And whether that's kind of embedding mentorship programs within what you do, which I think is a really valuable idea, whether it's about thinking about your own hiring practices and from a kind of absolute grassroots level up, whether it's about seeding your own privilege where you can to make sure that your voice isn't the voice being heard. I think they're all vital kind of systemic things that have to happen.
I'm going to come to you, Bali, and I'm really interested in asking you in particular about how you shift power, I suppose, from the position of an authority. So government wields enormous power and it devolves enormous power, usually through the allocation of funding. How do you use those tools to actually challenge the way that the power is embedded in arts organisations and particularly in the context of film?
I guess I can talk to an example of what I've gone through with Screen Australia, and this was before I joined the organisation. So a couple of years ago, 2016, Screen Australia commissioned or undertook research into representation with on-screen television drama characters. It was called Seeing Ourselves. I had personally lobbied Screen Australia for 2 years to do something like that, and I was really fortunate to be involved in the consultation process of that, and also indicating, okay, well, what do we want to see as a result of this? Because we were all very aware of what the results were going to show. So it's not just about, well, here's the pretty and ugly data here, and off we go. It's just like, no, well, then what are the programs or what initiatives can we put in place? So there was one initiative that came about of that called Developing the Developer, which was a pragmatic professional development workshop opportunity that was geared towards people from diverse backgrounds, and it skilled them up in a very particular professional capacity. And it's happened again, so we've done it twice. What's been really great about that is that it's developed the capacity of those individuals that were in those programs. It then also continued to develop them through placements out in the industry. 2 of the participants from the first year are now working at Screen Australia, so myself and Genevieve Chang. So it was very clear that this was about setting up a structure for developing people to get them embedded into the system. And so I can say that a few people in some of those organisations that I've dealt with have gone, yes, I have power in this space. I'm willing to train someone up to take over my job in the next few years. So that's what's really exciting. What I also want to say is that, yeah, these initiatives are really key and important. So there was recently, someone asked me about quotas and things like that in the industry, and should we have targets and quotas, and what are we afraid of, and things like that. I'm not sure if that's the answer. If we want to have quotas or targets or something that indicates that we're moving from this place to this place and that there's growth and that we want to achieve that, then yes, we should be aiming for achieving growth through diversity and inclusion. However, you can't just grab someone and go, great, you're a diverse person, let me just put you in this chair over here and hopefully look, but is that person set up to succeed by sitting in that chair? So then you've got to embed in your structure some level of professional development, personal development process that then gets that person ready that you've identified, or those group of people ready, identified that within 2 to 3 years that they will successfully fulfill on that role that you're putting them into. So I feel like many organisations are thinking that they're doing a really great job by being inclusive, and yes, we'll grab some interns and we'll place them here. But what are we doing to one, I guess, invest some of our own organisational capital into people to develop them as well? That's what's really key.
There's also a real danger there where nothing to do with intention, best possible intention, but there is such an othering nature to the language of diversity from an organisational perspective, where we want to find a diverse person like this is somehow this homogenous group that exists in contrast to whatever the establishment is. And the idea that the same approach might equally serve a CALD person or a person from a deaf person or a CALD person or an Indigenous person. The idea that this is one homogenous group for whom the same set of strategies serve kind of better integration and better inclusivity in your cultural sector is a nonsense. I mean, it's deeply offensive as an approach. And so what you need is organisations that are not just willing to recognise the gaps in their own structure, but are willing to approach those gaps in a kind of case-by-case basis rather than a kind of blanket thing. And I think that that's where lots of things trip up. I think the good intentions of government funding to support, I'm in favour of finding ways to have targets and quotas and kind of concrete outcomes that you want to have. But the danger of it is the idea that it has this kind of flattening out effect. It thinks about a kind of measurable outcomes in a government sense rather than actually human interactions. And that's the bit that I would want to be careful about rolling out properly.
Well, I happen to know that Kath Duncan loves quotas.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
I hear these points a lot. And there's a sort of assumption that the quotary thing is going to grab a 17-year-old Aboriginal person living out at wherever, blah, 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 and plonk them in Osco. It doesn't work like that. There's actually a lot of us, middle management, experienced, disabled, CALD, deaf, Indigenous people who don't have work. We've set up... Quite often we've set up our own production companies, we've run shows, we've produced other people, we've auditioned for things, we've worked on short-term... I mean, I could go on. We all know. And they're the people we're talking about. We're not talking about getting a 16-year-old from somewhere or other and plonking them somewhere. And I might add, for the person who's a target of that quota, as I was when I was 23, all my Christmases had come at once. Because for once, I had an equal playing field. Actually, I've been in that situation twice where there were targeted quotas for... One was a job with ABC Women's Unit at the time, and the other one was, of all places, Radio Skid Row in Sydney, one of the best radio stations ever made, where they set up this... In 1983, when we had a far better government, they set up this thing called a community employment program where all community orgs, and particularly those in arts, could apply for these Commonwealth Employment Program funding to set up particular things, and ours was to set up a news team, and on that news team we had to have one either Indigenous, CALD, whatever, one disabled, whatever, and the other whatever, and I don't feel in any way intimidated, what do you call that, tokenised, blah, blah, blah. All I knew was I had a job, and that was rare. Yeah. So I argue there is virtually no danger whatsoever. What's dangerous is leaving this present shitty situation as is, and we should be bold, because that's what's required.
All right, let's talk about the current shitty situation then. So, we're in a climate at the moment where virtue signalling can be seen equally amongst progressive and conservative forces. So how do we move people from rhetoric into action? We just don't want any more talk fests. So, what Tony, if there was particular actions that you would want, let's say, funders to take, or, well, let's begin with funders, what would they be? Let's get it out there. Let's ask them for the things that we want from them. What are those things for you?
Oh, jeez.
You always get the really big ones first, don't you?
Yeah. I don't know. There's so many things. I mean, where do you start? I mean, I said to you backstage, I just get sick of turning on the television. Since I was a child, I turn on the TV and I see another white face. I change the channel, I see another white face. Don't get me wrong, my white friends. but I have been seeing this since I can remember. And we're talking about, you know, massive changes. Really, they're not massive changes. Only massive changes to people who are not of colour. You know? So how do we get into the living rooms of people, diverse people? You know, I've seen that friend of mine on Channel 9 breakfast show one time, and he was, you know, he's fantastic, you know, and then he was gone. That's that quota done. We have an Aboriginal woman now, and it was this big deal, you know, as if Ernie Dingo never existed. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Totally.
I do not have the answers to these questions. I can only explain what I see before me. Like, even this morning, I turn it on. It's been a habit since I was a child, you know, watch the news in the morning. It's just been my family thing, you know, and I feel like I'm looking at television that I was looking at in 1975. Yep. You know, I'm hearing the same stuff on radio. You know, I wasn't quite sure. I listened to this radio program because I find them funny in the afternoons, picking up the kids, and I think they're funny. I like their kind of dry wit, and, you know, they make me laugh. And the first time I heard these guys say, oh, the Oscars, couldn't see a white man anywhere.
Oh, really?
I'm telling you now, this is what was said. And I thought to myself, now, am I missing the joke here? Like, because I hear them say things kind of like that, which you think, ooh, that's cutting edge. And I'm laughing, and I think, okay, I get it. But I thought, or am I being a little bit oversensitive here? But I'm listening to this shit that I can, you know, I can try and figure it out for myself as a grown man. But how many kids will hear that? Like, I heard somebody say in the 70s on television, in a news program, when there were protesters protesting the Invasion Day, way back then. And I remember they had the camera on a woman, a punter, having a go at these blackfellas who were protesting. And she said, why don't you go back to where you came from? I kid you not, Channel 9 it was. So how do we make these changes? I don't know. I think it's a combination of everything that we're talking about, and this whole power structure needs to be knocked down without a shadow of a doubt. It needs to be knocked down, knocked the fuck down. Because, you know, I'm sick of turning on Channel 9 and having them sit up there saying how wonderful they are, and Channel 7 blocking out their background because people are protesting their racist bullshit that they spew day in, day out. I'm sick of it. You know? And, you know, and I also said that, you know, unless we come together properly, unless we as a diverse community come together and wake the fuck up and realise we are a majority, and we actually have the power, which is why Black Panther made so much bloody money, you know, then nothing's going to change unless we do that. Yeah. We must come together. That's how these things are going to change. It's the only way, I think.
Michael, are you up for knocking the power down?
I think there's something really interesting in the Black Panther and Oscars example, which is the Oscars So White campaign. One of the things they targeted was who the voting members of the Academy were. And Spike Lee, when he was doing an interview after accepting his Oscar last night, talked about the fact that changing the people in the room who are sitting in judgment, changing those gatekeepers, was a crucial first step. It wasn't enough to stop a deeply regressive racist film from winning Best Picture, but it was a step in a particular direction. And it's why the work that Leah and the crew at Liminal are doing is so important, is that I think one of the traps that we get stuck in is accepting this idea about what audiences want and what people in the general public want on their TV screens, or want the idea that there is this homogenous mass who want it to look the way it's looked for 50 years or whatever. And it's bullshit. Black Panther shows that audiences are not the audiences that American studios were telling each other they were for the longest time. Liminal Mag shows that writers aren't limited to the ones that we get in older, more established I nearly named names and then realised that I don't think they're looking at the Facebook live feed, but we have this idea of literature's the area I know, and I know that one of the big problems with literature being entrenched is that the people who are reading, not just for literary prizes, but for publishing houses, for magazines, all come from that same entrenched power dynamic. They're all white, they're all middle class, they're all from a particular set of experiences. So what a fucking surprise when the books that come out of those houses all look the same, when the books that win the prizes all look the same. If we don't change our idea about judgment, our idea about artistic quality, if we don't acknowledge that different voices and different experiences and different types of readers are how we form an understanding of what should be put out into the world, then none of the other stuff flows on. Like, it's one of the things that I think we can change immediately and work immediately to intervene on, is thinking about who is reading scripts and deciding if they have value, who is deciding what plays go on in our theatre companies.
Who are the critics too?
Yeah, the critics. The critical culture and the critical language, I reckon, is something that if we could change that, then our value judgment, it becomes less about anything other than celebrating great art, which reflects a complete multitude of voices and experiences, and that's what the communities I move among want to be seeing on the screen or reading on the page. And I think that's the reality that we have to find a way to capture.
Well, I'm completely with you. Change it immediately. I'll go throw to Leah next, because you're writing about this, thinking about this all the time, particularly in the context of this sector that Michael's been speaking about. What do you want to see changed? How do you move a sector that has really entrenched practices into a new way of being?
The way I've done it is to stop caring what white people think. And to care more about what my community thinks and what my community wants. We recently launched the Liminal Prize for fiction, which only takes submissions from writers of colour. And of course we've received an interesting amount of white fragility as backlash. But in a country where our biggest literary prize, which has been running for 63 years, has been won by 3 people of colour. Wow. The Miles Franklin. The Patrick White has been running for 45 years and has been won by 3 people of colour. The Vogel, I think it's a little shorter, around 30 years. 3 is a lucky number. You know, I want to see more excellence, and I know that it's there. So instead of attaching myself to an institution, I think one of the ways we can do this is by creating our own, and encouraging community to gather and follow and create their own too.
Can I just say, and this is a genuine offer and an embarrassing one to do on a stage, but then I think it's the role of those institutions that do exist to find ways to seed their space to new creations like Liminal and make. So anything you want, you come and let me know, and we'll give over Wheeler Centre space for what Liminal are doing.
So I'm the director of the Wheeler Centre now.
I have told you, you have to answer the emails and eat the rest of the biscuit, but otherwise, yes, it's all yours.
Sounds like a pretty easy job to me. Barley, moving people to action.
Yeah, I can think of, again, an example that's happened in my life, and I have three mentors who have supported me collectively over the last, I'd say, 6 years, and they're 3 white women who are in positions of power, who are very creative, very strategic, and also very nurturing. And I'd say that where I'm at right now, the situation or the position that I'm in is a privilege, also a right, a well-earned right. I've worked my butt off to get here. And I declared it as well 10 years ago when I said that there was a lack of inclusion, a lack of multicultural representation in Australian television, and I'm going to be the one to make the difference. So I'm here because I said I was going to be here. And having said that, I've also been supported by amazing mentors as well. And I think that I can only model sort of the success that I've had, like the wins that I've had based off that. And I would say that our allies that are out there, that you've got to grab someone, whether they're emerging, whether they're established. Not every, as Kath said, we're not all freaking emerging. We've all been there's many of us that have been doing this for a very long time. We're very skilled. So stop putting us in internships all the time. So identify us. Go and find us. We're probably standing right next to you. So grab us, or grab the microphone off that person who's taking the stage.
Although
and hand
I
it
am
to
an
us.
emerging elder, apparently. Just saying.
So, and then on top of that, I think then also the responsibility also lies on us, that when we, like when I say us, I mean me, and I take this quote that I just discovered Toni Morrison just recently, and I'm really late to the game, but what an extraordinary quote. She says, "I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game." Nice. So I take that into my practice, and I mentor other people as well. So, but I didn't get here. I don't think I could have got here at this stage without those allied mentors with me as well.
Yeah, what great words, really fantastic words. I think that the inimitable Kath Duncan is going to be our last respondent to this question, and then we're going to throw over to you.
Oh, good
so
idea.
Kath, take it away.
Just briefly, I'm just looking out on this crowd, and if we're talking about making change, we actually have to get those in positions of power in the room, and I could be wrong about everybody, but I think we're in the room with people who are already on the path, already committed, and already interested. We actually need to get the disinterested in here. This idea about the quotas thing doesn't come out of my own head. I wish it did. It comes from observing what Arts Council England and other arts funding orgs in the UK have done, in the course of which, I'll get to my point, what I think we need to do, and again, I'm primarily talking about disability, but actually this sort of model applies across the board. What they did in the UK was set up a 10-year showcasing method where every 2 years they had a thing they called Decibel, which is a showcase of diverse works, and they were just 20-minute grabs each. And see, if you get the boss-makey people in the room and you actually show them the work, you show them the work, because, I don't know, but, I see it happen if I go out to these places that people look at me and think, oh, that poor thing, But if they saw me up on stage doing this crazy shit that I do on stage, they'd feel differently. And same for other groups. It's almost like you need to see the work, because up to that point, your expectations are very, very low. And I'm talking, across the board there. So I actually want more festivals, less talky, more showy, and to actually go, I don't know how you force these people into the room, but maybe this is just so cool and so exciting, you can't be out of this because all the other venues are going to book these people. So at Decibel, they attracted buyers, or I don't know what you call those people, the people that go out scouting for shows from all over Europe and around America, because they got that together. They'd laid out some really good invite lists. I don't know if they held guns to their head or whatever, but everybody was there and got to see the work, and the buzz was amazing. So, that's one thing I'd suggest, is that we go on like a diversity festival run, and we just show some of the work in different places. Veronica told me not long ago, oh, Kath, if you apply for funding, you can't put festival on anymore. Why not? Festivals are great. I want to see them back on the agenda with all of us. Thank you.
Yes, please. Can the Australia Council please fund festivals?
Yeah.
Well, you heard it here, people. The campaign is kidnap an arts leader and take them to a festival.
Yes.
Throwing over to you now. Keen to hear so many hands in the air. That's amazing. What an amazing panel. Please a clap for them first. And microphone to questioner number 1, who is...
Oh, no.
Nobody.
Where are the microphones?
Hello. Forrest, up the front.
Please stand up as well so we know who you are, if you can, sorry. Or just wave the microphone in the air so I can spot you.
Is there a microphone for Forrest?
I've got a question for Veronica. You stepped down from the Executive Directorship of Arts Access Victoria so that a disabled artist or disabled person could take on that role. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I can tell you about that. So the organisation made a decision that we wanted to be disability-led, and then we committed all of our resources to making that happen, and now we have an amazing new executive director who is Caroline Bowditch.
Yes.
You've seen her today. The work that we had to do was our work. It was internal, it was about the organisation being ready for it to be disability-led. She had to do no work other than to come and be in this space with us, and we've had a fantastic journey together. We've decided to do, Caroline and I have decided to define our leadership transition in a completely different way. So we've been meandering through leadership in conversation for the last 6 months, which has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. And I ask every single person in the room and everyone who's listening, if you're thinking about leaving your job, why don't you leave a legacy? Why don't you actually plan for change that makes something substantial happen, rather than just thinking about your next move and your next opportunity? So that's my story. Next question.
Hello, I am Creative Tara, and I am very salty. One thing I've noticed, especially in Australia, is that for all the talk about increasing diversity, one thing that doesn't get respected is transferable skills. For example, like Screen Australia has all of these programs to get diverse people into writing for different shows. Even then, the application is like, oh, you must have experience writing for a major TV show, blah, blah, blah. Like, where are we going to get that? I have written 1 billion words in my lifetime. Why does none of that count? And, you know, this is advice about like, oh, you know, just apply, even if you're only 60% qualified. As a brown immigrant who has been struggling for 10 years to find a job, 5 of which was on a bridging visa, which means I qualified for nothing. That advice does not work. If you're not 1,000% qualified, you know, I have been 1,000% qualified and I don't get interviews. So I feel like if we're going to talk about government funding, which is already not an option for people on bridging visas, so I don't know why we spend so much energy on that, but like talk about, oh, we need to increase diversity. Can we please acknowledge that not everyone is going to have specific enough experience, but that doesn't mean we can't do the work.
Exactly.
Yes.
At Screen Australia, the 2 funds that I'm working on, so I manage enterprise funding and also work with the development team on development funding. So the eligibility criteria has been removed because of that feedback that we've had from the sector, and because of identifying that there has been very little, I guess, opportunity for access onto a pipeline or pathway into the industry for marginalised groups. So I'm really proud to say that Screen Australia is already changing those. So for story development, for one of those streams called Generate, you do not need to have any credits. You just need to have a distinctive story. You need to have a clear idea about what that story is and who you're speaking to and how you're going to develop that. For enterprise funding as well, we've specifically made, especially for the people, enterprise people, which is the professional development of individuals in the industry. We've also indicated that we understand that the historical lack of opportunities for many marginalised groups means that there are many of us out there that don't have specifically screened skills. So we're also interested in hearing from you if you have skills from other areas, perhaps arts related, or community cultural development, or other areas in media or anything like that, that can also transfer into the screen industry. So definitely taken that feedback on board over the last couple of years, and those eligibility criteria have been changed.
Does anyone else want to comment on the issue of employment?
Can you just make it a little bit tighter, the question? Because we've kind of talked around it, but
Well, we're still experiencing what is blatant discrimination in terms of employment discrimination.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we should call it what it is. What do we do about that?
Well, I'd like to reboot affirmative action and EEO and all that stuff. Remember that? You know, back in the dark ages of the 80s or whatever, when those sort of principles affected, well, specifically government, but there were incentives also for private orgs to work with affirmative action and EO principles. You know, I don't know why it died. It's almost like we were meant to hit some utopia 20 years ago so we could forget it, which we didn't. And we're still here, and I think employment is really key. It's not just in terms of, you know, income and, you know, being able to, you know, live and eat and all that stuff. It's also about finding belonging places, you know, and quite often when you make that wedge into an org and you're a disabled person or a person from a cold background or an Indigenous person, it's almost like sort of magic. You sort of like drive this wedge in, and it's really hard to start, but suddenly people are coming in behind you. You know, I think employment is really key. Though, does everyone know Jackie Brown? She always argues as well that not all of us can work conventionally, and I think that's one of the issues as well, is a lot of jobs are like 9 to 5, 5 days a week till you drop dead at your desk, and a lot of us don't want to do that. You know, job sharing, more flexibility, flexible hours, you know, thinking of even full-time jobs as like project jobs, so you work from here to there and work on this specific thing and then move on to the next one with a break, stuff like that. All that stuff is really, really key to equality and equity.
Beautiful. Next question, up the front, in the stripes.
Hi, I'm Coralie Dimitriadis. The Seeing Ourselves report from Screen Australia, from what I recall, it did break things down into, like, for example, I think there was like a category for Greeks and Italians, and like it actually broke things down into cultures and how underrepresented they are. I'm just wondering, because you spoke about quotas and that, and I think that, and you also just spoke now about some programs that actually allow people to apply when they don't have the TV credits. But for me, I think that, first of all, not enough is being done. Secondly, there needs to be quotas. And why don't we look at SBS, for example? I think SBS is run by white people. Yeah, it's a multicultural broadcaster. Where are their quotas? You know, that's supposed to be our avenue in. But what's happening there? You know, I definitely think there needs to be quotas. I think there needs to be more research done. What groups are being represented, what groups aren't being represented, and there needs to be targets. There needs to be figures being presented so organisations are held accountable instead of having these like fluffy fairy tale policies of like, oh yeah, we're doing stuff, but where's the hard evidence? I want to see evidence.
Yeah, good point.
Some of the challenges that I'm coming across in regards to needing this very specific data is that there's some legislation out there that also impacts how you can collect that information in your workforce. So about a year and a half ago, I was working for another funding agency, and where I collected this amount of diversity data amongst funded arts organisations, and many were fine with reporting that. There were a number that just said, are you asking us to go around and ask all our staff who's LGBTQI? Like, we could go to jail for this. So there are some issues that we have to also grapple with in terms of legislation as well. So some of that is got to do with anti-discrimination, some of that's got to do with privacy. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying that this is the situation. I know personally I'm trying to work it out, because I would love to see the data and the statistics there. I'd like to also map out where the industry is at right now, and also measure that, you know, at particular intervals going over the next few years, so we can try to figure out, is there any success coming out of these? You know, for example, removing eligibility criteria. Well, does that mean we're getting new people getting funded and new ideas and stories? It's tricky. I don't know the answer just yet. Stay tuned.
So maybe taking all that on board, that's a piece of work for Diversity Arts Australia. I'm looking at Lena now to say, well, we do need that research and we do need those models, and we have to stop making excuses that the system is just too hard to implement. There must be an implementable system. What is it? And let's get going.
I agree. Yeah, let's work together.
I think we'll have one last have we got time for one last question before? Yes, one last question.
30-second response.
Hi.
1 minute.
Okay,
great.
the front.
Everyone's talked about employment. It's really fantastic. It's such a big issue. But I'd really love to hear from you, Michael, about why you think that predominantly white arts organisations are so risk-averse in their hiring policies.
Yeah, good question.
Because I think that those organisations, many of them are inherently conservative. I think they're conservative because of their funding structure. I think they're conservative because of the traditions they belong to. Like, I think that they are the definition of establishment, and I think the ones that know they need to do better are perhaps overly cautious about how they approach that because they don't want to get it wrong, and so on the way in they get bogged down. And I know that I think that we're guilty of this. We get bogged down in overthinking, well, what if we get it wrong or do it the wrong way or whatever, and we're not willing to say that thing that I said at the start, which is that we fail. Like, I think we need to find ways to be much more proactive in it, and I can only speak for the organisation that I'm lucky enough to work for. But I think in terms of it as a systemic thing, it's because they're inherently risk averse in everything that they do. The way they think about audience, the way they think about market, the way they think about all of that is based on old ideas about success, and so then that flows through to their employment practices as well. We were really proud to launch last year a thing called The Next Chapter, which was a national scheme to mentor writers. It was available for 10 writers across the year, and we were really keen that it genuinely helped support writers who were marginalised by the kind of traditional structures of the publishing world, who didn't have the mechanisms in place to help them have their voices heard. And we did work I'm incredibly proud of on that and rolled that out. But we got 1,100 applications for 10 spots. Wow. And so by definition, we fell short of helping the vast majority of people who summoned up the courage to self-identify as people who wanted to have a chance as writers, who felt like they were shut out from that in what else they could do. And that's a really hard thing for us to look at and think about, okay, well, how do we roll out year 2? How do we do better? How do we make it not a zero-sum game where you can only work with 10 people at a time? And then the second bit of navel-gazing we had to do, the second bit of analysis of ourselves we had to do, was recognising how the very white structures within the Wheeler Centre, how we could make sure that we subverted and changed those and addressed those so that the ways in which we acted as readers, we acted as advocates for this work could be organic and genuine. And it's a work in progress. I'm really proud of what we've done, but I don't for a second think that we're anywhere near done on it.
Well, unfortunately, we are done just for this session. Which is a tragedy because we could keep on talking
all
for
day.
hours. And the great thing is we'll have an opportunity to talk with you all after at the break time and again tomorrow. But please join me in thanking this wonderful panel. And enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Cheers.
I just wanted to quickly announce that we'll be coming back at 3:15. You may, if you still have unresolved questions to ask, wish to sign up for any of the debrief forums. There are some sign-up sheets at the end, and I actually think it's very clear that we'll need to have some ongoing debate.
Great session. There wasn't that. Did you get to? I did. Did you get to hear it?
But I'm gonna sit.
Oh, you sit. Right.
That's why I said I would like something that I can hand and just like, just I'm surprised. So I don't want to stand and do it and then sit. I just want to do it when I do it. So this is the one you mean? Okay.
With the reverb, so you're gonna walk around?
No, I'm gonna sit.
Sit.
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm gonna sit, and I would like one microphone to be kind of on reverb that I can hold whenever I feel like. This would be a side or like.
Oh yeah, are we doing?
So you also up here? Okay, good.
ونغرق في دافئات المنى No, what do you think? How do you feel? Yeah?
Yeah. That's good. I've got a bad headache, so I need the stands. I'm going to have the stands.
Are we having the PowerPoint? The PowerPoint?
Yeah, the PowerPoint's going up.
Who's controlling?
Can I?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, whew.
Oh my God, technology.
Yeah, I know.
No worries. Are you gonna move around?
No, I'm not gonna go anywhere.
Can I just move your chair slightly up?
Yeah.
Sorry. That's perfect. Can I move your chair slightly up?
Where's the cameras?
Over there.
Yes, all good, all good. Do you want to have this one? I never did it. Do you want to do it? I actually never did it. I just start thinking other people always do it.
Is that alright?
Yeah. Come on. Get over it.
I'm going to click that. Thank you. So is it just that's forward and that's back?
نجمة الصبح فوق الشام علتي.
قولي لي كيف هيديرها. Something?
You guys happy? You have everything it is?
I do know, but I just don't feel confident. I love your haircut. I love your haircut.
What a concept. What a concept.
Oh, Jose says we're good to go. He was making me very nervous there for a little while. And if we are ready to go, the best place for people to be would be coming in a kind of central direction here. Our next session, which will take us through to 3:45, which is the day one roundup and reflection with our writer-in-residence and citizen journalist, is going to be an incredible performance, kind of performance essay conversation called the Diversity Monologues. As you can see, I'm making padding nice patter, which is waiting for people to courteously return to the front of the room. Team, folks. May I ask the kind Wheeler Centre ushers to start communicating with our coffee drinkers and just encouraging them to rejoin the community. For some reason, the song So Rory, so Rory, it just came in my head. Welcome, everyone. I am so thankful for everyone's continued and sustained energy throughout today. I know that it is a long day and that we are dealing with a welter of words and ideas, lots of which are worthy of just sitting with and taking time. I'm grateful so much too to Caroline Bowditch, who helped give us that kind of just 5 or 10 minute respite from the words. But I'm also grateful to the next 2 speakers who are also going to share a different perspective on the world and the way that we've been discussing diversity. I know that I'm adding even more words. It's like kind of throwing petrol on a burning pile of wood. But anyway, I would like to welcome and introduce Azil Tayyar, who's a Palestinian artist who was born under occupation in Jerusalem. Azil's life encouraged her to make art that represents what Arab Muslim women face in this world. For her, art is an act of resistance and a tool for survival. Her main focus is empowering women through art. As the first artist in her community, she initiated children and youth platforms to challenge the way people think about art. She's a creative director, art producer, and installation artist that shares her life experiences in leadership and community development. She creates an interactive experience which invites audience to participate in the way she designs her space, body, and vocal presence. Please welcome her today. I would also like to personally thank Azil for bringing the warm and human sounds of a little person in the back room, which I think are so nourishing to hear. We take them initially sometimes as a social awkwardness of like, oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. And I was like, what? For reminding us that life is regenerative? Bish. Good work. Paula Aboud is a writer, community cultural development practitioner, creative producer, and educator. For over 3 decades, she has worked with diverse communities in capacity building projects. She was awarded in 2007 the Western Sydney Artists Fellowship for her blogging project Race and the City, and was the 2013 recipient of the Australia Council's Ros Bauer Award for Lifetime Achievement in Community Cultural Development Practice. She's a leading trainer and educator on human rights approaches across the community here in our arts and education sectors, and I'm delighted to welcome her also today. Azil and Paula, I will leave you to introduce the diversity monologues.
Thank you. We'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the Kulin Nation, all peoples, elders, especially elders, the warriors, those who have passed, and pay our respects to First Nations peoples here today, and First Nations peoples from other lands. We also want to acknowledge the warriors, the advocates, and the activists who've come before us. We wouldn't be sitting here today if there hadn't been our uncles and aunties, those warriors who forged paths in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s in this space. And I want to honour those people, because they've given us the language, they've given us the strength, they've mentored us. I actually want to particularly acknowledge the First Nations mentors who have guided me on this land, especially working with vulnerable communities. So I think it's really important we honour those that have come before. we are going to start, because it's depending on what side of, I guess, the spectrum you're on, it's either kindy hour or nana nap hour. We're going to start with a song. Asil, would you like to not put people to sleep, but maybe let's hear a mother tongue other than that foreign language, English, the language of the colonizer?
I'm not known to put people to sleep, but that's fine.
Well, beautifully.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be sitting next to this brilliant woman here, and so happy to be invited to be in this panel with her. And I am choosing a song from Syria, a song for those warriors as well that have fought another kind of occupation in our land. As a Palestinian and as a raising a child, a Syrian child, I just feel the responsibility to keep sharing my culture and her culture, just so she one day come back and go back to her country and be proud that she is who she is, a Palestinian Syrian poor girl that is living few occupations together and on a land that is occupied. يا نجمة الصبح فوق الشام عليتي عليتي لجواد أخدتي والنذال خليتي خليتي يا نجمة الصبح فوق الشام عليتي عليتي لجواد أخدتي والنذال خليتي خليتي. Paula, why we are sitting here talking about diversity?
Good question. Probably one answer to that is how often do we hear Arabic in the public space, and especially in the last, I guess for me, in my activism and community work, and as a Arab feminist writer, you know, the Arabic language is so demonized in the public space. So that's one reason why we're still talking about diversity. But I guess I want to kind of go to the title, Monologues. You know, in a way, we decided it's a bit ironic because here it's two Arab women on stage in the afternoon. And in some ways, you could say, look, we're having a dialogue, aren't we? But I guess we chose monologue as a broad statement, an ironic gesture towards the whole idea of talking about diversity. After 30 years for me in this space of talking about diversity, it feels like a monologue. It feels like I've been talking to myself, to my people. And my people, when I say my people, are those who share some form of oppressive, systemic discrimination, outsider status, if you like, exiles, those who refuse to be part of systems. So in some ways, today what we want to do is actually draw on a little bit of history. Some people have done that today. I want to kind of add, Eleanor started by saying, what can we give as an activist of 30 years in the multicultural community, cultural art space? What I can give, and what I always try and give as a teacher and a community advocate, is knowledge and stories. And so part of this is our stories from a perspective that spans 30 years and a perspective that spans...
Yeah, well,
I have been here for 5 years, and every time I mention something to Paula, it's like, yes, like for me, like every topic that people talk about is kind of new. Like I don't even know how long people have been talking about things, and I always assume that I'm coming with a new kind of thing that I'm angry about, but it feels like it's like 30s or like 40s people are, and like so like for the last like 2 weeks, I'm like whenever I come up with something and like I think like I'm a genius, it just not really. And like whenever I come with an idea, people have thought about it before. So that's kind of one of the things I really, like that's kind of what makes me feel kind of why is it like going so long? Why people cannot really bring these ideas into action more? Like how many symposiums or ideas like have been done since I've been to Brisbane, for example, or like all these kind of talks and symposium, why people cannot really go from here, like Veronica said, and go and really do an action and not just look for their job and be individual, but kind of really think about their own, why they're really in the art, why we just, once we step our feet there and we are not artists that are passionate so much and we are in a position of power, we really forget about all the history of passion that we have been into and like that brought us to our leadership position, we suddenly just forget about that life.
And, I mean, what you kind of said reminded me of our internal... I have several kinds of spaces where I have these conversations. We have internal dialogues, we have internal kitchen table, if you like, conversations, and we have public conversations. And often they're very different kinds of conversations. And so I guess I want to kind of track a little bit. I don't think it's working. But in any case, I want to track a little bit of the diversity. Oop, there it goes. I wanted to actually start with this quote by a Nigerian-American writer, Nnedi Okorafor. And this kind of goes to the heart of if we're, when we're talking about diversity conversations, this is precisely what I think happens and has happened in the last 30 years. As an activist, as an artist myself, that's been forced into, I guess, the diversity advocacy space. And, I write, but I've had to fight in order to be able to write what I want to write. So Nnedi says, it is the essence of all things to move and change and keep going forward and backward and around. And that kind of sums up the diversity discourse, if you like, that space. And I feel in the last few years we've gone, if you like, around. I feel like we're going around in circles. I have memories of times where we did go forward. I have very strong memories, physical, emotional memories of the backslide. So that's probably why we're still talking, because it's never kind of moved beyond the talk. There have been spaces that have been forged from the ground, and I really want to acknowledge most of the changes we've seen have come from grassroots, have come from artists, have come from communities, have come from social movements, First Nations, civil rights, queer movements, post-colonial feminist movements, environment movements. So, it's come from the ground, and we need to acknowledge that the change is us. I put this quote up. It's a bit of a, I'm not going to read it completely, but I actually want us to deal with the politics of diversity in some way. We've talked a lot about diversity, but there's a part you were talking about. I don't know all this history because it is a politics. It's about power. Politics is always about power. But I guess my sense of the going around in circles is under neoliberalism, and I kind of, in the multicultural space, have actively fought against what we ended up with is a neoliberal multiculturalism, where everything's reduced to the individual, everything's commodified. And in Alana Lenton and Gavin Titley's quote, basically talk about, under neoliberalism, diversity really does get reduced or foregrounds the diverse subject who is autonomous, meaning individualised, and non-conflictual. So, the second quote really goes to the heart of the kind of work we do, the good and bad subjects. So in what's, for me, the problematics of diversity. And I agree with Deb's thinking around diversity. I love that word. That word's come from us. It's been appropriated and institutionalised. And I think when words become institutionalised, they go west, but it's our job to reclaim and like community engagement's been completely appropriated as well. But these are our words, and I refuse to hand over the words that have been fought for in people's blood. So I guess in the institutionalised context in Australia, diversity, we know, is publicly and officially celebrated, yet the kind of diversity that gets celebrated is where not everybody qualifies to be recognised as the right kind of diverse subject. What's your sense of that in your space?
Well, I just think about what make me feel make art, and what make me feel like I need to do more of it, and how much the organizations around me really supportive of the different art we are making, and the kind of the good and bad diversity. And I've been here 5 years, but I have seen enough kind of fights from us, the artists, to kind of be us and be there, and also be kind of recognized as who we are and what we really bring and change. And it's kind of sad to be kind of warned from different people and artists not to collaborate with different institutions, not to do things, because whatever I bring as an artist, as an individual, as a passionate person, kind of become another kind of thing of research, and it just goes in there in the books, and it disappears, and then people from somewhere come and talk about it and claim it as their own kind of ideas and all kind of passion and all kind of new invention that we have spoken about 5 years ago. So this is kind of, and I have been, as I said, just 5 years here, and have been an evidence to all of these stories, sad stories, and heard about all these kind of sad mistakes or treatments from organizations around that just kind of take for granted this kind of poor, by poor, not really having any powerless artists that come and with all the passion come and share and throw all their kind of ideas and things to these kind of big institutions and just disappear, and no one knows about them, and they kind of try and never be heard, and then just kind of lose hope just before they can get there. So I have lots of
and that for me is a really big issue, especially for first generation. I work with a lot of recently arrived refugee artists who always say there is no space to be, because if second and third generation, artists struggle with the system, who've been socialised in schools here, so English effectively becomes, a bilingual maybe setting, but certainly know the context. If you're newly arrived, and you're an artist, it's almost impenetrable, the barriers that exist. And what this really goes to the heart of is I've always had a political issue with the whole notion of celebrating diversity, because that's the good diversity. The bad diversity is when we demand that institutions and gatekeepers basically engage with the stories we want to tell, whether they're around social justice. They actually, I kind of have said before, we want to stick around in the foyer of diversity. We don't want to go to the basement of diversity. And this is a really important point for us, because we are constantly told what stories are palatable for a particular audience.
If I'm allowed to share one of the stories I have here, and I'm looking at someone that I'm telling her story, I found a small kind of project that's going wild now called Bookjay, and I have here two of my most beautiful artists, and one of them that was born here and raised here, and she's a brilliant artist and spoken word and a singer, and her first language is Arabic, but she has never really shared any of her songs or sang in her language, and I get into tears because like she has the most beautiful voices, and she just never sang it because like it's not really welcomed. It's not really something that is like, you know, I sing in Arabic, I insist, and like I know it's something that doesn't really happen often. I sing in my own language, and man, I don't really care if you understand it or not. Like you could understand or not what I'm singing, but I am singing in my language with my love. If you don't really hear it with your hearts, you better not listen to me, because that's all I can give. And like with her, I also like listen to it, and like regardless if I know the language, I just like heard from her, Asil, but no one ever asked me to sing in my own language. And once she starts, you cannot really stop listening to her. And I was one day at FCAC, which is I call my home, and I got an artist coming to me that I never seen before that said, Asil, 2 years ago, I now have my own whole project in my own Latin language just because I heard you singing in your own language. Man, just let these people just do what they want without telling them that they're not Australian enough. Because what is Australia if it's not all of these stories, all these refugees, all these journeys, all these catastrophes and crises? Like, this is what made Australia diverse, or whatever diverse is. And people just ignore all diversity and focus on what is the mainstream. Like the mainstream is us, and whatever else is just not really Australian, you know, like you cannot just stop thinking about that, because we make this beautiful place and you just don't see it because you want the movement to be yours and the sound to be used and the language to be English, and just really don't listen to other beautiful languages that for me is much nicer than English. But just people don't really listen to it. You know, people stare at you in every place you go because you just, you know, different, which is that we are all different, but people don't really see that. So like once I had this beautiful lady singing, I had people like Arabs that stayed and saw 3 shows in a row that each one have 2 hours difference between them, like 10 or like 1 hour difference. They stayed 10 hours in a place just to listen to something that they listen once in a year to. Like they didn't want to leave the tent that we built because, man, I wouldn't hear to another Arabic language for a year now. Man, don't kick me out of your place. And that's just the passion of these people, and they're thirsty for a different thing than just an orchestra in a place, or they're not even invited to those events. So once we create an access place, no one really wants to fund it because it's not really, it's like a community work. So who wants to really fund that, you know? Or like all these kind of, sorry, I'm just too angry.
Anger is a useful tool, I have found in my 30 years of community work. I mean, you talked about access, and I've kind of put up a slide about I've called it linguistic backslides, because that's part of what our struggle is. Language is power, we know. And, you know, in the 90s we had multicultural arts policies, and the next 2 slides, which I won't show you, is an old Australia Council multicultural arts policy, which actually mentions rights and social justice. You just wouldn't see that now in policy. Trust me, I've read them all. But certainly access and equity was official policy in the 90s, and it kind of, I'm talking about it because everyone today, we all kind of come together in kind of agreement that the systemic structure is where we need to go. And certainly access and equity policies really looked at systemic structural change. That's the transformative, sustainable, that's kind of reminds me of an activist that once said, do we politely knock on the door, sit down at the table and have a cup of tea, or do we knock the door down, break the table up and create a whole new system? Which after 30 years, I'm there breaking up that table. So I just want to go back. Some of these words I think are important for us to actually think about how we use language. We don't talk about anti-racism in the multicultural space anymore. Everyone talks about harmony. I don't do Harmony Day. I just can't do it. Participation, everyone talks about integration. Integration is a failed policy. Let's not go there. Inclusion is in all contemporary policies. We used to talk about exclusion. When we're talking about exclusion, we're talking about power. If we talk about inclusion, we don't talk about power. And I think it's really important to revisit what our warriors before us forged this language for a reason. And, the neoliberals have got hold of it and anyway, we won't go to the policy. I think this is being live captioned, so you can find it if you want to see that old historic policy. But I guess from what Asil has said, in some ways, diversity space is all about one-off projects, isn't it? So the standard approach has been and remains a focus on symptoms and effects of something like lack of representation, rather than the causes, the root causes of inequity and inequality. So what we've been dealing with for 30 years, as I have experienced it, is that the most narrow perimeters of change have only been possible and allowable. And I think that's really important to acknowledge here today, that that's not working. So let's go to just quickly Asil. Asil and I found this 5 Faces of Oppression, which might be an interesting framework for us all to wrap up today. We've had a big day. All our panels, I think, have been extraordinary in sharing stories and a history of ideas to take us into the future. Iris Marion Young came up with this 5 Faces of Oppression. It kind of speaks to what everyone's been talking about today. And Asil and I, our dialogue or monologues with each other and by ourselves have really centred around these 5 faces, and they kind of go to the heart of our experiences in working with institutions in the broader cultural sector. And I'm not just meaning the arts sector, talking about a broader cultural sector. If you work in education or health, or one of our questioners works in women's, the DV sector, we should be working across all those sectors. So exploitation, marginalisation, powerlessness, cultural imperialism, and violence are the 5 faces of oppression. And we could write a book of stories on those.
One of the things I was thinking about when not only talking about diversity as a word, but about kind of who counts and how we can do things. As like when I came to Australia 2013, I had very limited. I spoke 3 other languages, so why would I bother learning English? And everybody else was really laughing at the way I structure it, and I could asking people to correct me. But I graduated with excellence, and I came here and kind of after being kind of the star of the place and the uni, and then coming here to be no one, and no one can see me, and no one can really understand my language, and everybody's correcting my grammar. So and then I came here, and I came to Melbourne after, you can imagine, I landed in WA in Bunbury, if you have ever been there, which I really, struggled. But after that came to Melbourne, and I was part of a play that was written by Samah Sabawi. And I just kind of saw how not much of support such a play. The play was having lots of language. The play was I was a singer in the play, but it was a beautiful sold out play, but still then none of this big theatre. It's not Aladdin, it's not this, it's not that. It's just an Arabic language thing. Who would pick that up or take this kind of opportunity? And then I saw another play that was written, a beautiful play, just it will be in 2 months in La Mama, and if you want to see one show, it's have to be them. But she was kind of part of the MTC, I forgot the program, but it's just the most beautiful thing, and it's language, and it's lots of diversity, it's bringing so many artists in there. It's women-led. It's like everything that should touch, but no one gave that a space. And of course, it was another kind of white fellas that kind of took that, you know, opportunity, and they didn't say anything, but they said, you know, it doesn't really fit there. Like, if the funder came and said they are so impressed by this, if who really decides what goes in the MTC theatre? I'm sorry, I'm saying that because it's something that was everywhere. Like, it's just so hard to know and see that things that, like, artists and art plays and like shows or projects or programs that's really worth being seen by the mainstream, what they call it, by everybody, that there's lots of passion for and waiting for years to see, it just doesn't really get the opportunity. Even with Book Jail, like, we have to fight our days every day to be able to show something that all my community is dying for, but man, I cannot pay my artist $150 to be able to stand and do it, because I'm not an institute, I'm not kind of big organization, I'm not doing what the mainstream wants, or like kind of, you know, what called Australian. So like, it's this kind of struggle that I feel like, how can I be an artist that doesn't really know the language? I had 1 million emails sent to lots of organizations, those ones I won't name, but it's sad when you send asking mentorship. I speak English hardly, kind of now I do, but think about 5 years ago, I wanted to know what kind of language of grants that does really accommodate someone that doesn't speak English fluently or good. Like, I wanted to know the language of like politics of the art, and how can I trigger the artist in the panels that is giving the money. I had to fight very hard on one of the panels for a grant that was given. Like, there was 2 grants in this panel, and one is by individuals, refugees from refugee backgrounds that wanted to tell stories, and they had a small video taken by their phones, but they were so real, they're telling their stories. And in the other side, there was a grant for, like, was $5,000, and the other side was 3, like, Australians wanting to tell the stories of these refugees and asking for $20,000, and the panel wanted to give the $20,000. Why? Like, why? Like, you know, they're just like, I had to fight it on my body. You are giving this grant. I will go out and tell everybody about it. No way. So I was really angry, because this is kind of what's happening. There's one-on-one accommodating. Who tells the stories? Like, who really have the right to share these kind of. Why people should tell our stories? Let us do it our language, our way, our movements, our passion. Why you have to be a part of everything we do? Just let us give it on, you know? Like, give us a space. So this is kind of one story, and imagine how many kind of art organizations, funding bodies, go through this every day, and they just give it to the wrong people. Like, not because they're wrong, they might have amazing passion. It just, man, can we just do it ourselves? You know, can we just tell our stories our ways? Because while someone else tells the stories, there's lots of details that is important for us. You forget, you don't really give attention to, you don't really focus on, because you are focused on what you want to hear, what your people want to hear, what we want to tell is totally different. Just let us do it ourselves. Sorry, I'm angry every time I talk about these things. Sorry.
So we've got 1 minute.
Oh, God.
No, these are our stories. Special Victors unit here. These are our stories. We wanted kind of to end on a couple of quotes from women we love, women of colour. The only last comment I want to make, as someone who's been in this space for 30 years and worked in solidarity intersectionally across all kind of different forms of oppression with mostly migrant and refugee communities, but certainly in solidarity with First Nations people and people with disability and LGBTQI communities. My sense of the structures that I hope it comes up tomorrow in this forum is the whole funding regime is simply got to be restructured so that major performing organisations take the bulk of money, and the small to medium sector where diversity flourishes and is nurtured get the crumbs. So I would really like to see that come up as a big issue tomorrow, that if we're talking about systemic structural change, we really need to have what I would call cultural equity and moving resources more equitably, at least. Let's finish with these quotes. I'm going to read the first one and Asil's going to read the second one. The first one is from Audre Lorde. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. She writes, "Those of us who have been forged in the crucibles of difference know that survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to stand alone, sometimes reviled, how to make common cause with those other identified as outside the structures in order to to seek a world in which we can all flourish. We want to flourish." The second quote.
I don't know if I'm up to telling you this tale, if it were easier, more constant, if I could be promised that every word would be understood, every meaning appreciated. I have to cry it out and hope it finds its way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paula and Azil, I am so grateful for you closing the formal kind of sessions today with so much passion and anger, because I feel like those are the simmering realities that keep so many of us motivated and moving, and they come also hopefully with great joy and love when we do get those opportunities to share stories and to be a part of culture together. I'd like to welcome Claire G. Coleman as our writer-in-residence for this symposium, and potentially, I think, our other citizen journalists. Are they going to come and join you? They will, gradually, when the greatness is thrust upon them. No, not at all. Because we wanted to take a little bit of time now just to do some reflection and feedback. I will hand over the mic at this point, but maybe come back in before we deal with some of the formalities and the goodbye-ness. But in the meantime, please welcome Claire G. Coleman.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not going to do my citizen journalist rant today, because we've got tomorrow. We've divided up into two groups of two. I just thought I'd introduce everyone first, though. We've got Jess Walton, we've got Pollyanna and Magan, and I'm Claire G. Coleman. We're going to start with, would you like to go first, Magan? We're not really that organised, because we've been writing our responses as the day's gone on. So we're going to have two people today. We're going to start with Magan. So please welcome Magan to have his statement.
Good afternoon. It's been a lovely day of inspiring conversations and thoughts. So I'm a writer and I'm a poet, and I predominantly focus on the idea of connecting with oneself through poetry. And I find that poetry is a powerful tool to help one connect with themselves. And in another way of saying that is poetry helps people self-determine. And so it helps people articulate their human experience. And so it captures stories in ways that no other artistic form does. And so poetry has a strength and wisdom to make the unseen. You can see it a bit more, you can kind of mould it, you can kind of touch it, kind of make sense of it. And so poetry is about connection and making unlikely things, connect. And in doing, having that connection, the question of authenticity happens. And so poetry helps make authenticity kind of more bendable, and you can kind of begin to have a conversation about that. And so much of the conversations today, for me, have been about authenticity. And again, poetry is a powerful way to do that. And in the question of authenticity, the major problem when a person is attempting to self-determine, and that self-determination is met with dominance, there's a process of erasure, and they go through this vicious battle of trying to hold on to a level of authenticity or trying to figure that out. And one of the worst things that can happen is meeting barriers towards your own authenticity. And so then the battle becomes twofold. And there's an inward battle of, you know, who am I? What am I doing? What's my purpose? And then the outward expression of that authenticity. And I thought of reading a poem of mine that I wrote in response to, so about a few months before the Grenfell demise, started in public housing, and my flat got caught on fire as well. So, and I wrote this poem, and the fire really represented, for me, it was a metaphor for what was really going on between the tenants of public housing and the office of housing. And so this poem is called Rectangle. Rectangle. You were the silhouette standing behind the burning window last night. Your mother fell to the ground like a building collapsing when she realised it was you. This morning I found my inheritance, my mother's trauma tucked in my chest. The police visit. We are sorry about your loss, Marion. The body was identified as your son's. She lets out a groan. She lets out a groan as ugly as the mouth of a lion eating a baby. I thought illness or drugs would take him away, but this. I hold my stomach when I go to bed. My body wants to bend from the hips. The loss drags my head to my feet to form a circle. In the middle, I carry his invisible face burning into rest. Sometimes I can hear him at night, running with the bustling Somali boys underneath the commission flats. They sound like bullets and confetti, civil war and celebration. Thanks. So I'm going to end with a poem by one of my favourite poets. Her name is Watson Shere. And this poem really, for me, articulates the kind of spirit of today and encapsulates what I feel. Just trying to articulate this poem. This poem is called What We Have. Our men do not belong to us. Even my own father left one afternoon is not mine. My brother is in prison is not mine. My uncles, they go back home and they are shot in the head are not mine. My cousins stabbed in the streets for being too or not enough are not mine. Then the men we try to love say we carry too much loss, wear too much black, are too heavy to be around, much too sad to love. Then they leave and we mourn them too. Is that what we're here for? To sit at kitchen tables counting on our fingers, the ones who died, those who left, and the others who were taken by the police or drugs or by illness or by other women. It makes no sense. Look at your skin, her mouth, these lips, those eyes. My God, listen to that laugh. The only darkness we should allow into our lives is the night. And even then, we have the moon. Just before I finish, I'd just like to encourage everyone to kind of use these poems as a metaphor for this evening and the kind of images that it brings out, and take that to your work. Thank you.
So thank you, Magan. Now we're going to have a response from Pollyanna, and as I said before, Jess and I will give you our responses tomorrow so that we can split the load a bit. So, Pollyanna.
Thank you. I'm nervous. Thank you so much, Claire. Since this morning, you've been just a big warm hug. And I would like to pay my respects to the Kulin Nations, elders past, present, and emerging. I'm from Gippsland, which is about 3 hours that way, I think. And we're Gunai Kurnai. I'm 6th generation colonizer, and my ancestors had a very active role in the destruction of Aboriginal culture in Gippsland, and that's a responsibility that I carry with me to acknowledge the privilege of being here today. because it is privilege that brought me here today. I drew a picture to kind of demonstrate that or speak that to it, and I love that it's got rectangles in it in order to talk about structure, I guess. And a white structure did bring me here today, and a white structure did allow me to have access to this amazing event today. I am dyslexic, so a lot of the things I just can't read in a book. I have to rely on people's stories and face-to-face interaction and a lot of context to actually understand what people are saying at me. And I say that out loud as I'm practicing to be a better advocate for dyslexia. 1 in 5 people do have it, and a lot of us do work in creative industries. So there's probably a chance that a lot of people in your organisations do have dyslexia, which means emails aren't great for us, FYI. So what I took from this was this intersectionality, and I know you've probably heard a lot about these things a lot in your organisations, but it's actually the first time I've heard a lot about this because it's just conversations we don't have publicly back home, especially in the rooms full of white men who tell you to stop talking about this. So it was really refreshing to see the humanity in the room today and the vulnerability and the proud advocacy and directness. I really appreciate it. So instantly when intersectionality was said, this image came to me in my mind, and it is meant to look like an optical illusion of within the white structures you can see these black dots, and they're very random, and if you look at them they disappear and appear somewhere else. And if you concentrate on something closer towards you, the structures become blurred and the dots become more common. And again, when you try and refocus, it's almost like they disappear. And the little road at the top is the road that brought me here, which is colonization, I guess. So I guess my reflection of today is that all the conversations and stories are really important, and they're important to be heard and shared. And it's important that these platforms continue to exist, even though they can be exhausting and painful and frustrating. But every person that walks into this door does leave changed, and with a new perspective. And then I guess the inner and outer work of actually making that an action is our own responsibilities, and we have our own gifts to execute those responsibilities. And I guess that's probably a summary. And I just really want to thank Regional Arts Victoria for allowing for this opportunity to happen, for me to be here, and the symposium for making it so accessible, and all the hard work that all the speakers have done to be here on the stage and share their knowledge. I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate all the work that people put in to make it accessible for people like me and people not like me, because there's so much. And I guess to sum up, in my moment of sum up, you know, I think that underlying thing, and we chatted a bit about this in our reflection, is like this idea of quota and how do we get the money to where it needs to be and all those things. Like, inclusion and diversity is a lot of work, right? And it takes a lot of people to do that. That's jobs, like, you know, and quotas may be one way to increase that jobs, but it's a load that we need to share. And there is a lot of expertise to share that load. We're ready. And my challenge to the I don't know, authorities in the room. I don't actually know who's in this room, but anyone of important people that I'll probably meet in a meeting in 6 months' time and say sorry. But, you know, the funding system, I totally agree, is deeply flawed, and it is the pathway that brought me here to this stage and to try and be a dyslexic writer, is that unless you can fill in that form or even open the computer to get to that form, you do not have access to the resources or opportunities that those forms grant. That's the sum up.
Well, I'd like you to thank Magan and Pollyanna for me, because they've done a great job. And I guess, I mean, I'll produce a more vigorous and complete response for you tomorrow. But I'd just like to say that there's 4 people on this stage. We've been coordinating ourselves quite well today, and we all met this morning. And we're all from different diverse backgrounds. We've got very little in common. And so that just demonstrates that if someone really has the will to work in a diverse environment, it's actually not that hard, people. So thank you. We'll hand back to the ending of proceedings, really, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.
I feel very lonely on the stage here, so I'm just going to encourage our citizen journalists to stay here a little longer, if only so that you might recognise their faces and know that while they're operating as kind of proxy voice and respondent for you in the audience, they're also there to be dialogue conversants, people to talk with and bounce these ideas off, because undoubtedly if you still have questions to ask, then they will be having much the same. I want us to know that there are only a couple more minutes left in our formal program, but we have deliberately tried to build in some more informal and open-ended spaces for these conversations to continue. So between 4:30 and 5:30, there are some closed debrief sessions for those who wish to identify or affiliate with culturally and linguistically diverse groupings, First Nations, people with a disability, and an open debrief session that anyone might attend. We have asked folks to sign up, but I really do believe that it's, I mean, aside from it being strictly no denim, it's not like they won't let you in if you haven't signed up. Obviously no one else was a bouncer here in their 20s, but fine. Oh well. But I also do think that it is a really great opportunity to take a brief breath of air and to kind of center yourself, see some regular vitamin D, sunlight, and then we would also like to welcome those who are available who might like to join us for a mixer between 6 and 8 p.m. tonight downstairs at the Moat. So many of the rich things that I have learned in environments like this have been in the informal spaces, the conversations that we don't necessarily have in moderated spaces. And so I would welcome you to come to be a part of the closed or open sessions from 4:30 till 5:30 here, and then there'll be ushers to direct people to the separate spaces, or to come and rejoin us between 6 and 8 o'clock p.m. downstairs at the Moat, and if not, we will regroup here at 9. I want to share one tiny reflection about some of the things that have come up for me, and there are very, very many. Systems upgrade is one of them, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. But I wanted to talk about something that is really positive, which are these tiny moments where I have felt that electric spill of feeling that happens when someone makes art in front of you. Whether they sing, whether they bring an image of themselves in their post-it notes, whether we catch the glimpses of their feistiness and passion, I have had that lovely rekindling of energy for what it means to make art. And I think that the more barriers we can move out of our way to then bring more folk into that space of energy and desire and passion and joy, then the greater we have a chance to learn what it means to be together in this country, to belong, and how to define what it means to be good within it. So I look forward to rejoining the conversation with you tomorrow. Thank you.
You're not going to stand here and tell me that you're actually in love with this woman, are you?